looked at Qing Xiu with eyes full of hope. After all, from now on Lingnan will certainly be part of the Tang territory. We all hope you can stay to govern it, and only you can govern Lingnan well. This is the wish of all our people. We sincerely ask you to remain. Qing Xiu smiled. Although I am leaving Lingnan now, His Majesty has allowed me to handle all Lingnan affairs from Chang'an. Even the appointment of officials can be decided by me. So there is no need for you to worry. Is that really true? The people, who had just been frowning in worry, brightened with joy at these words. If Lingnan's affairs could be managed by Qing Xiu, they would never again fear the hellish life they had lived before. Since Duke Qing must leave, we will not insist on stopping you. Please go with our blessing. Qing Xiu and his party set out northward again, while the Lingnan civilians stood outside the city gates, staring at his departing figure for a long time. Only when they could no longer see him did they return to the city with deep regret. In any case, everything in Lingnan was now settled. Li Er's mood had been unsettled recently. It was just after the new year, and news from across the country was mostly bad. In Jiangnan, there had already been large-scale flooding since early in the year, and in some areas the floods were followed by ongoing epidemics. These troubles were minor compared to the truly difficult matter for Li Er. News from the northeast border about Goguryeu's movements. Frontier reports more than once mentioned that the Goguryeo people were rapidly recruiting and expanding their army, and also purchasing large quantities of grain from surrounding small states. Although no conflict had yet broken out in the northeast, to guard against trouble, troops from the northern frontier had to be redeployed toward Goguryeo. What's the situation with Tuyuhun? Li Er put down the frontier report and asked Xiaoyu. Send someone to warn them in a few days. For now, they are still behaving toward the Tang. But they keep sending troops into the western regions. Shache and Lufan have stopped sending caravans through the Heshi corridor. Trade has been suspended. Li Er frowned. Although he did not care much about the commercial value those two small states brought to the Tang, this meant that if Tuyuhun was not dealt with, sooner or later the western region states would be forced away from Tang, breaking trade and allegiance. Even the hard-won trade with the caliphate might end. This matter cannot be delayed any longer. Li Er considered the situation of using force against Tuyuhun, feeling that preparations were almost complete. The only uncertainty was who would be the commander of this expedition, but that did not change his plans. Sherwan, in a few days send envoys to Tuyuhun to tell them it's time to send a hostage to the court. This matter has already been delayed for a whole year, it absolutely cannot be delayed further. Your Majesty, since Tuyuhun already shows signs of rebellion, how could we possibly still send a hostage? Halfway through the sentence, Xiaoyu suddenly understood Li Er's meaning. The two men exchanged a look, and Li Er gave a meaningful smile. Your Majesty, wouldn't this be too hasty? We haven't even decided on the commander yet. I have my own plan. Li Er said no more, but even those words were enough to put Xiaoyu at ease. I understand. Just then, hurried footsteps of a censor official came from outside, making Li Er frown. These days, the sound of approaching footsteps annoyed him. Most of what they brought was bad news. Your Majesty, urgent report from the direction of Lingnan. This surprised Li Er greatly. Since Qing Xiu's expedition, there had been no news about Lingnan. In fact, in his busyness, he had nearly forgotten about Qing Xiu's campaign there. A message about Duke Qing, surely it can't be bad news. Li Er motioned for the censor to read it aloud. In Lingnan, the campaign is complete. Lingnan's 70,000 troops have been wiped out, Honghe City has been taken, King of Lingnan Feng Ang burned himself to death out of fear of punishment, and not one member of the Feng clan survived. Li Er looked at the censor in disbelief, even suspecting he had misheard. What did you say? Li Er stood up on the spot. Lingnan has already been conquered by Duke Qing? With only those 5,000 men? He clearly remembered that less than a month had passed since Qing Xiu's departure. Subtracting travel time, there had been hardly any extra days at all. This feat completely surpassed even the campaign with Li Jing to pacify the Turks. In under 30 days, with only 5,000 men, he had settled a problem that might have taken 50,000 troops a year to resolve, a record never before seen and never to be repeated. Give it here. Li Er ordered the censor to hand him the report to read personally. After reading it over and over, confirming it was absolutely true, Li Er burst into loud laughter. Good. Good. This Duke Qing truly is my lucky star. No wonder people say he is Tang's bearer of fortune. Nothing connected to him ever turns out to be bad news. The censor added, Your Majesty, Duke Qing is now on his way back, saying he will reach Chang'an within half a month. Good, prepare in advance, when Duke Qing returns, we must hold a grand welcome. Li Er immediately gave the order. Li Er was excited not only because Qing Xiu had won a great victory. More importantly, as a top strategist and advisor, Qing Xiu's opinions were extremely important to Li Er in governing the court. In recent days, many of the matters that Li Er had been too busy to handle were also because of certain troublesome issues for which he could not get Qing Xiu's advice. And not only Li Er, the Duke's mansion also quickly received the news of Qing Xiu's imminent return. The entire residence soon became busy preparing, and several of the ladies could not wait to see Qing Xiu return at once. Not wanting the welcome to be too plain after his long and dusty journey, Li Yuchan even closed Baiwei Ju for a whole day to prepare for this event. The regular patrons of Baiwei Lu were scratching their heads in frustration. Only Su Xiaochun, with her due date near, although eager to join them in welcoming him, could not get out of bed these past few days. At most only 5 days left before I give birth, will my husband make it back just in time to see the child's first moment? Su Xiaochun stroked her big belly and asked the midwife with some concern. The midwife smiled. Madam, I cannot say for sure, and besides, I don't know how long it will still take Duke Qing on the road. Then is there any way to delay the birth by a day or two? Su Xiaochun began to daydream. The midwife turned pale with fright. Madam, such words must not be spoken. Even if I knew, I wouldn't dare do such a thing. Su Xiaochun smiled playfully. Of course I was only joking. She caressed her belly, and the baby inside seemed to respond to her, moving slightly, as if acting spoiled. Su Xiaochun's face was full of affection as she murmured, Good child, wait just a few more days, so your father can see you the moment you are born. Ever since leaving Ziwu Valley, Qing Xiu had been eager to return home. Apart from necessary rests, they had been traveling at top speed the whole way. Even the horses could not stand the constant jolting along the road, their mounts had been changed again and again. Everyone knew Qing Xiu was hurrying home to be with his wife for the birth, so no matter how exhausted they were on the road, they had no complaints and accompanied him in traveling day and night. The journey originally planned to take 7 days was shortened to 4 by their forced march. On the morning of the 5th day, as the first rays of sunlight shone on the walls of Chang'an, Qing Xiu happened to see the scene. We're finally home. Shui Rengue, seeing the familiar city, laughed aloud. That Lingnan land is so damp, if I stayed a few more days I'd be covered in sores. It's still better here inside the pass. Home. Without another word, Qing Xiu spurred his horse and galloped straight toward the city gate. The soldiers on the wall, drowsy as they waited for the shift change, were suddenly wide awake when they saw a group of riders charging toward the city. Stop! It's not gate opening time now. Any trespassers will be severely punished. The soldiers suddenly felt the leading rider looked familiar. When his horse came closer, they finally saw clearly that the rider was none other than Qing Xiu. Heavens, it's Duke Qing. Wasn't it said he'd need 2 more days to reach Chang'an? Put down the bows and arrows, do you want to die? Why are you all still standing there? Open the gate at once. Skip all the formalities when Duke Qing returns. The captain of the guard quickly ordered the gates opened, and Qing Xiu rode straight in without slowing his horse in the slightest. Brothers, you've worked hard. Duke Qing, will you go to the palace first? His Majesty ordered that if you returned early, you should go there first. Before the captain could finish, Qing Xiu's horse had already disappeared from sight. Quickly report Duke Qing's return to His Majesty, don't waste any time. The captain might let Qing Xiu ignore Li Er's orders, but they themselves dared not delay. It had to be said, Qing Xiu's early arrival without prior notice had thrown Li Er's welcome plans into disarray. The ceremonial arrangements were not yet ready. Just as the sky was growing light, Su Xiaochun, waiting to give birth, suddenly felt movement in her belly, followed by sharp pain. She realized the child was about to be born. This is really the worst timing. She smiled bitterly to herself. She remembered Qing Xiu still had 2 days left before returning, but the child couldn't even wait that long. Quickly prepare for Madam's delivery, gather all the attendants immediately, don't delay. The midwife on duty didn't dare waste a moment and hurried to summon help. Soon the news spread through the entire Duke's mansion, and almost everyone grew tense. The other ladies waited outside the room for news, hardly daring to breathe. Thinking that they too would one day go through this, they became even more nervous. Sister, you're hurting my hand. Cui Yuyan looked timidly at Changsun Pingting, who then realized she had been gripping Cui Yuyan's hand tightly. Sorry, little sister. Changsun Pingting quickly let go, and Li Yuchan laughed. It's not even your turn to give birth yet, and you're already this nervous? It will happen sooner or later, and I've heard childbirth is dangerous. Sister should be fine, right? Don't worry, with so many helping, the delivery should go smoothly, it's just a pity our husband can't make it in time. Yunyang comforted the ladies, though in truth she was extremely nervous inside. Just then, the main gate of the Duke's mansion was suddenly pounded on urgently, as if someone outside was desperate to get in. "Who is it, banging the door so early? Do you know where you are?" The gatekeeper was startled and annoyed. "Right now there's an important matter in the mansion. No visitors. Go back where you came from. Open the gate." The voice outside was calm but firm, and it instantly made the inattentive gatekeeper jump. Duke Qing has returned? The servant hurried to open the gate, and saw Qing Xiu, still in armor, with his 13 guards standing before him. "How is madam? Has there been any sign of labor these past days?" Qing Xiu's first question was this. The servant's face lit up. "You've come just in time, this morning madam just started. The midwife is helping her now." Shuiren Gui and the others were a bit surprised. "Such timing? We really made it." Hearing this, Qing Xiu did not hesitate and headed straight for Su Xiaochun's chambers. Before he reached it, he saw the other ladies waiting outside the door, all extremely tense. They listened to the groans coming from inside, their eyes full of worry and fear. "Is sister inside all right?" Chang Sun Pingting was so tense that her fingertips had turned white from pressing them together. "What are you afraid of? You'll go through this sooner or later. It's not that hard to get through." Suddenly, a hand gently rested on Chang Sun Pingting's shoulder, accompanied by a soft voice of comfort. "Yes, yes." Chang Sun Pingting responded instinctively, but then realized something was off. She looked toward the voice and saw that familiar, handsome, and warm face. "Husband." Overjoyed, Chang Sun Pingting threw herself into Qing Xiu's arms, burying her face in his chest. Not only her, the other wives, upon seeing Qing Xiu, also happily rushed into his embrace. Soon, he was surrounded by them, with no room to even step back. "Husband, you're finally back. This journey must have been hard. You didn't get harmed by the miasma in Lingnan, did you? Is your health all right? Next time, don't go on such a far campaign. We've been worried sick this whole month." The wives spoke over one another, each face full of joy. "Don't worry, this time in the southern campaign I wasn't hurt, everything is fine." Qing Xiu felt the soft bodies pressing against him from all sides, and it was truly overwhelming. "How is Xiao Chun?" He did not forget the main matter. Yunyang quickly replied, "Elder sister has been inside for half an hour already, we don't know how she's doing. We wanted to go in, but the midwife wouldn't let us. We're so anxious." Qing Xiu said no more. He had originally wanted to use his inner sight to check on the delivery room, but for some reason felt inexplicably nervous, not daring to look too deeply. About to become a father for the first time, Qing Xiu actually felt a tension he had never experienced on the battlefield, in officialdom, or in business. No one would have thought that the man who could strategize for 10,000 troops would show this side. Just as Qing Xiu hesitated, Su Xiaochun's groans inside finally stopped. Then came the sound of a baby's cry. "Mother and daughter are safe. Mother and daughter are safe. Wonderful, it's a girl." The midwife's delighted voice came from inside, and everyone outside who had been holding their breath finally relaxed. Joy and cheers for the arrival of the new life immediately followed. "Congratulations, Duke Qing, on your precious daughter." The guards and servants all offered their congratulations, their faces sincerely happy for Qing Xiu. Qing Xiu quickly entered the delivery room, with several wives following closely behind, just in time to see the midwife coming toward them holding the baby. "Congratulations, Duke Qing. Mother and child are safe, and your precious daughter is very healthy." Qing Xiu felt countless emotions well up inside him. He carefully took the baby from the midwife's arms and looked at her crying. For some reason, once she was in Qing Xiu's arms, the child gradually calmed down, clutching at his hand and refusing to let go. The little one, with her jade-like features, was very cute. Just from her delicate face, it was clear she would grow up to be as beautiful as her mother. Good child. As a first-time father, Qing Xiu found it hard to put his feelings into words. The baby, tired from crying, slowly fell asleep in his arms. The other wives all tried to get a look. "Husband, let me see first, let me hold her. Let me see too. She's so cute. What's the rush? Xiao Chun hasn't even seen her yet." Ignoring the others squabbling, Qing Xiu gently sat beside the half-conscious Su Xiaochun, still holding the baby. "Husband." Su Xiaochun, with her last bit of strength, gripped Qing Xiu's arm. When she opened her eyes, she saw her husband holding their child, smiling. At that moment, Su Xiaochun felt completely at ease, her husband had made it in time. Qing Xiu looked at the now sleeping Su Xiaochun and softly said, "Let's name her Qing Ruyuan." Just as Qing Xiu was welcoming his first child, Li Er finally learned of Qing Xiu's return to the capital. So fast? Fresh from washing up, Li Er was shocked, 2 days earlier than expected, and the ceremonies were not even ready. "Quick, summon Duke Qing to the palace. I must see him at least once in person." Your Majesty, someone already went to look for him at the Duke's residence, but it so happens that Duke Qing's wife is giving birth. Li Er suddenly understood why Qing Xiu had rushed home 2 days early. I see. Huh. When Cheng Qian was born, I too happened to be away on campaign and didn't even see him the first time. His brow relaxed, he no longer felt Qing Xiu was slighting him. With such a matter, who wouldn't go home first? Especially given Qing Xiu's great service. If I remember correctly, this should be Duke Qing's first son? Your Majesty, it's a daughter. Hearing this, Li Er's eyes lit up. In that case, a marriage alliance between the royal family and Qing Xiu in the future would be much easier. All right, don't disturb them. Let Duke Qing stay at home with his wife and daughter. Send a gift on my behalf. Li Er gave the order with a smile. After truly becoming a father, Qing Xiu finally understood what it meant to be cautious, as if walking on thin ice. Holding the little princess in his arms, he didn't even dare to breathe too loudly, afraid any rough movement might wake her and make her cry. But putting her down felt even harder. Who wouldn't want to hold such a cute daughter all the time? Even with the fatigue of the long expedition still in his body, he was willing to just hold her and look at her sleeping face. Even this alone seemed to sweep away all his exhaustion, leaving no thought for anything else. Qing Xiu even ordered Li Yuchan to close Baiwei Ju for 3 days, summon all the head chefs back to the Duke's residence, and hold a feast for 3 days in celebration. The news spread quickly through Chang'an, from the palace nobles to the common folk, everyone knew. In surprise, many nobles and officials immediately sent gifts to the Duke's residence. On the day of the feast, the servants were nearly out of breath carrying the many congratulatory gifts. The gifts from these high-ranking people were all priceless, and not one could be damaged. The guests at the banquet were all people of great status. Aside from the top figures like Cheng Yaojin and Li Jing, even eminent ministers like Xiao Yu and Fang Xianling arrived at once. As soon as the loudest of them all, Cheng Yaojin, arrived, he was already shouting to see Qing Xiu's daughter. Old Cheng doesn't have a daughter yet, let me borrow some of your good fortune so I can go home and have a girl myself. When Cheng Yaojin saw Qing Xiu's daughter, his face was immediately full of affection. He wanted to hold her but didn't dare to stretch out his hands. Uncle Cheng, if you like her, then hold her yourself. What's there to be shy about? Cheng Yaojin scratched his head. Better not. I'm a rough man, my hands are neither light nor careful. If I accidentally hurt the child, that would be bad. You. Even now you haven't learned to be careful in everything, have you? Li Jing laughed heartily and scolded Cheng Yaojin. Here, let me hold her, all right? Of course. Li Jing carefully held Qing Ruyuan. The adorable child wasn't afraid at all. Instead, she stared at him with clear and pure big eyes, laughing, gege. Vaguely, Li Jing seemed to recall how Li Yingqi looked as a child, yet now his daughter was about to marry Qing Xiu and become his wife. If Yingqi has a child in the future, the banquet you host must not be worse than today's. Li Jing lowered his voice and spoke with deep meaning. Qing Xiu smiled and said, of course. I've always treated all my wives equally. As the banquet went on, more and more nobles and high officials arrived. Many local commoners were also drawn by the lively scene. Although they couldn't enter the banquet, they crowded outside, curious to peek inside. Even though it wasn't proper for people to gather here, because of Qing Xiu's order not to drive the commoners away without reason, the guards couldn't force them to leave. Seeing more and more people outside, Qing Xiu thought for a moment, then called Li Yuchan over. How's the situation in the back kitchen? Can they handle it? Of course. All the chefs from Baiwei Ju are here. With their help, it's more than enough to deal with this event. In that case, Qing Xiu looked at the commoners outside who were watching enviously. Then invite them to have a good banquet too. Li Yuchan's eyes widened at once. Husband, are you serious? If you invite them too, soon half the old commoners of Chang'an will gather here. Qing Xiu laughed boldly. Even if the whole city of Chang'an comes, I'll still host them all the same. His daughter had been born, of course he wanted to announce it to the whole city, so that everyone would remember her birthday today. After giving the order, the servants bustled around again, preparing empty courtyards and rooms to host the commoners outside. The Duke of Qing's precious daughter is born. In Chang'an City, regardless of who you are or your status, you may come to the Duke's residence for a banquet. No gift money is needed, just say a blessing and that's enough. But remember, no crowding or fighting. Only when the earlier guests have finished can the next come in. Anyone causing trouble will be expelled immediately. When this news spread, the commoners outside were first surprised, then burst into cheers and congratulations. Regardless of the dishes, if they could eat here once, they would have something to boast about for life. In those days, I ate at the Duke of Qing's banquet. Thank you, Duke of Qing. I've always said the Duke of Qing is my idol. In all of Chang'an, who's more generous than him? His daughter's birth even lets us share in the joy, haha. Crowds of people poured into the Duke's residence. Word spread fast, from 1 to 10, 10 to 100, sweeping across the entire city. Soon all of Chang'an was in an uproar. Anyone free rushed to the Duke's residence for the feast. By midday, there were so many guests that the residence couldn't hold all the tables. Qingxiu simply rented nearby empty houses and courtyards, setting up banquets there to host the people. In Chang'an, only he had the wealth and boldness to hold a banquet for the whole city. Just then, after finishing his work, Li Ji changed into plain clothes and, with Empress Changsun, came personally to congratulate Qingxiu. Unexpectedly, when they reached the street, they saw a sea of people. Everyone was lining up to enter and eat. What's going on? Li Ji was stunned, the scene was overwhelming. Your Majesty, please follow me this way. Xueran Gue, who had been waiting here for some time, came forward to receive Li Ji and led him through a side way into the residence. Greetings, Your Majesty. Qingxiu gave a slight bow to Li Ji. Seeing the emperor's astonished face, he smiled. Your Majesty doesn't mind a little noise outside, right? You really are generous, inviting the whole city to eat. Even when the retired emperor unified the realm, he wasn't this bold. Hee, I only want the whole city to remember my daughter's birthday. Well, you've succeeded. But if you spoil your daughter like this, she might end up truly spoiled. Even Li Ji had to admit Qingxiu's way of thinking was impressive. Qingxiu didn't care at all. If she's spoiled, then so be it, she's the daughter of the Duke of Qing. Li Ji gave an order, and a guard immediately brought over a gift box. A small token, keep it for your daughter. Curious, Qingxiu opened it and found inside a bracelet carved from red agate. In the sunlight, its light showed 7 colors, dazzling and beautiful. Isn't this the top-quality agate from Lufan in the western regions? Qingxiu recognized it at once. Only 2 such pure pieces existed in the entire western regions. One was in Shache, and the other had been taken by Lufan from Kucha and given to the Tang to curry favor with Li Ji. That Li Ji was willing to split that agate to make a gift for Qingxiu showed how much he valued him. In all of Tang, no one else enjoyed such treatment. Thank you, Your Majesty, for your thoughtfulness. Hee, it's nothing. But next time you return from campaign, if there's nothing urgent, could you come to the palace first? Qingxiu smiled. Forgive me, Your Majesty, this time there were special circumstances. But rest assured, the Lingnan matter is settled. Good. Hearing this, Li Ji was relieved. With that assurance, his gift was worth it. It's been a long time since I tasted Baiwei Ju's food. Today, I'll take this chance to try it again. Of course, Your Majesty will be satisfied. This grand banquet lasted 3 whole days before it ended. Although the people of Chang'an still wished for more, just being part of it was something they could brag about for a lifetime. In the future, they could proudly say, we too were once invited to a banquet by the Duke of Qing. Of course, Qingxiu's most important goal was thus achieved. Now the entire city of Chang'an had remembered his daughter's birthday, and in the future, whenever they brought up this topic, they would surely recall it. Such a bold move made even those high-ranking nobles deeply impressed. In all of Chang'an, only the Duke of Qing could be this willful. Although the banquet was over, Li Ji considered that Qingxiu's daughter had just been born, so he postponed the triumphant return celebration ceremony. Only 3 days later, after Qingxiu had spent enough time accompanying his wife and daughter, did he return to court. Li Ji arranged for him an extremely grand celebration. This time, Li Ji truly gave Qingxiu full honor. Not only were all civil and military officials required to attend, but all the rituals and procedures were of the highest standard. There were even so many tedious formalities that Qingxiu began to yawn. Too troublesome. Only after the day-long series of ceremonies finally concluded did Li Ji announce, in front of all the officials, everything he had previously promised Qingxiu. The Duke of Qing, with only 5,000 elite soldiers, utterly defeated 70,000 troops of Lingnan, and in just 15 days took Lingnan, bringing it to complete submission, rendering unparalleled merit to our great Tang. Now that Lingnan is pacified and its entire territory belongs to the Tang, yet the customs of the barbarians remain deeply rooted, it requires someone skilled in governance to reorganize it. Thus, the Duke of Qing will temporarily hold the title of King of Lingnan. For 5 years, all major and minor affairs of Lingnan will be managed by the Duke of Qing. As soon as these words were spoken, the entire court was in an uproar. Although Qingxiu could only control all Lingnan's affairs from Chang'an, the authority granted to him was in no way less than that once held by Feng. This was like defeating one king of Lingnan and then immediately appointing another. For 5 years the court could not interfere in Lingnan's affairs. But given the Duke of Qing's merits, and the resources he used in this campaign, His Majesty granting him such a reward is not excessive. I've also heard that for the next 5 years at least 40% of Lingnan's tax revenue will go into the Duke of Qing's hands. That's no small amount. The reward is indeed generous, but the Duke of Qing has brought His Majesty great advantage. The officials whispered among themselves, and of course there were many who were envious and jealous. Naturally, there were also those who sincerely felt happy for Qing Xiu, especially Old Cheng, Chang Sun Wuji, and others. Chang Sun Wuji cursed himself inwardly for being so short-sighted. Before the expedition he had thought Qing Xiu was bound to lose. Now it was a complete slap in the face. How about it, Old Qing, wasn't Old Cheng's judgment right? The younger generation is truly formidable, we old fellows can't compare anymore. Cheng Yaojin said to Qin Qiong with deep feeling. Indeed. Even if we weren't old, we couldn't possibly achieve what Qing Xiu has done. The already frail Qin Qiong felt a pang of sadness at these words. Since the Xuanwu Gate incident, Qin Qiong's health had declined rapidly. Leading troops into battle was long out of the question, now even riding in armor had become a heavy burden. Seeing Qing Xiu enjoying such success, he couldn't help but miss the years when he had fought campaigns all over. Of course, Gao Shilian, who had never gotten along with Qing Xiu, watched with a gloomy face. Several times he wanted to speak, but forced himself to hold back. Now was not the time to confront Qing Xiu, who was at the height of his prestige. Then Li Ji read out a long list of gold and silver rewards for Qing Xiu, but Qing Xiu completely ignored them. He simply had too much money. At this point, hearing such numbers made him numb. Your Majesty, this expedition was not my work alone. Those 5,000 elite warriors fought and died for the country, they must be heavily rewarded as well. Especially those fearless officers who led charges. At the start of battle they always took the lead. Without their help, I could not have taken Lingnan so easily. Qing Xiu then timely presented a register. The names written inside were the officers and commanders he had valued during this campaign. I ask your Majesty to promote them. Li Ji was overjoyed at this. He knew Qing Xiu's eye for talent was exceptional, anyone recognized by him was sure to be a capable general in the future. Glancing at the list in his hand, Li Ji immediately decided to reward every one of them well. Among them were low-ranking officers and nameless soldiers. Qing Xiu had observed each one during every battle and march after reaching Lingnan. When drafting the list, even Qing Xiu himself was surprised, there were so many capable people in the Tang army. Seeing Qing Xiu receive such a heavy reward, everyone understood how much weight it carried, and most offered respectful congratulations. At least they knew that in their place, they wouldn't even dare boast about such a feat, let alone actually conquer a country with only 5,000 soldiers. Yet in this rising atmosphere in court, someone still jumped out to be the target. Your Majesty, I believe that although the Duke of Qing has rendered service to the state, his merits do not deserve such rewards, it is far too much. The single-minded Wei Zheng actually chose this moment to stand out and stubbornly voice his opinion. As soon as he spoke, the court immediately fell silent. Everyone looked in surprise at Wei Zheng, who had made himself the target. This old fellow really didn't care about timing when tearing someone down. They all knew that by speaking now, he wasn't just criticizing Qing Xiu, he was also indirectly rebuking Li Ji. Li Ji, unwilling to waste words with this obstinate man, only coughed lightly. Beloved subject, you have never been on the battlefield, you don't know how hard this war was. The Duke of Qing's reward is not excessive. This was Li Ji's hint for Wei Zheng to stop, but that clearly did not match his headstrong nature. Wei Zheng stubbornly continued, the gold, silver, and fiefs granted to the Duke of Qing are naturally deserved. But giving him the temporary title of King of Lingnan for 5 years, and control over all of Lingnan's affairs, this is truly inappropriate. What is inappropriate? Li Ji frowned. Wei Zheng replied slowly, the court used so much manpower and resources to recover Lingnan precisely to incorporate it into our territory forever, preventing any further rebellion, and to make the people of Lingnan accept our teachings. Therefore, we should abolish the title of King of Lingnan altogether, destroying all unrealistic hopes the people of Lingnan may have for the Feng clan. At this point, Wei Zheng cast a subtle glance at Qing Xiu. Now, not only is the title retained, but for 5 years all appointments of officials and all political affairs in Lingnan are handed over to the Duke of Qing alone. How, then, can Lingnan gradually accept the court's royal authority and never rebel again? His words were extremely unpleasant, clearly implying that he did not trust Qing Xiu, fearing he might become like the former king of Lingnan. If he built up Lingnan into a separate power again, wouldn't all the court's efforts today be wasted? Before Qing Xiu could react, Linger's expression immediately darkened on the spot. Dr. Wei. To pacify Lingnan, Duke Qing led troops on a personal expedition through high mountains and long roads, with only a very small number of soldiers, using countless strategies before finally taking Lingnan. He even disregarded the fact that his beloved wife was about to give birth, showing such loyalty to the country. How can you slander him like this? In my eyes, nothing matters except the safety of the state and the people. Any potential threat must. Dr. Wei, why don't you write a memorial about this and submit it later? We can discuss it slowly then. Linger rudely cut off Wei Zhang's words, truly unwilling to hear another half-sentence of his nonsense. After speaking, Linger intended to announce that today's celebration for the triumphant return would end here. Your Majesty, please wait. Qingxiu stepped in first to stop Linger, then looked at Wei Zhang with a half-smile. Linger, in order to maintain the reputation of harmony between ruler and minister, had never openly fallen out with Wei Zhang, but Qingxiu had no need to consider such things. Wei Zhang had long been wantonly biting at people everywhere in court, and Qingxiu had heard enough. It was time to teach this old man a lesson. What Dr. Wei says is quite interesting. Your skill with words far surpasses your actual ability to handle affairs. When it comes to expanding territory, you are nowhere to be seen, yet in court debates, you always have a share. Looking across all dynasties, you truly are one of a kind. These barbed words instantly made Wei Zhang's face turn ashen. Just as he was about to speak, Qingxiu forcefully interrupted. I know you are not convinced, Dr. Wei, but in all your years in court, have you ever contributed any true achievements or key proposals? As long as you can name even one, I will immediately give up the commendation for pacifying Lingnan. This follow-up sentence left Wei Zhang speechless, his face flushing red and pale in turns. Indeed, that was the truth. Though he felt he had made many contributions and given countless proposals to Linger, as for actual achievements directly tied to him, he really couldn't name one. Of course, it wasn't that none of his opinions had ever been adopted. When Linger first ascended the throne, he suffered from cold ailments and wanted to build a heated pavilion. Wei Zhang directly compared this idea to the excesses of Emperor Yang of Sui, forcing Linger to drop the plan. Thanks to that suggestion, Linger had been plagued by the cold ailment ever since. The ministers below struggled hard to hold back their laughter. Qingxiu's words were basically saying to his face, it makes no difference whether you exist in the court or not. They couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. Duke Qing truly had an offensive edge. Linger inwardly cheered with satisfaction. Finally, through Duke Qing's mouth, he could say what he had always wanted to say. Duke Qing, let's speak more gently. No need to harm the harmony between ministers. We're all working for the good of the court. Linger pretended to mediate. In truth, he wished Qingxiu would attack even more fiercely. Qingxiu said calmly, Your Majesty, it is precisely because you have always been lenient with Dr. Wei that he still does not realize how useless he truly is, always thinking himself the pillar of the court. I have always served the court wholeheartedly, always putting the court's interests first. Wei Zhang immediately lost his composure, blushing and defending himself loudly. I think all Dr. Wei has left is that one piece of loyalty, serving for years without tangible achievements, yet pointing fingers at those who do. If it were me, I would have long stepped back to let the capable take the position. Wei Zhang was nearly driven mad, his head was full of indignation, but he could not utter a single rebuttal. After all, what was said was indeed the truth. Compared to Qingxiu, his actual merits were like a drop in the ocean. Qingxiu had the standing to rebuke him to his face, and Wei Zhang truly had no standing to talk back. Dr. Wei, why are you silent now? Qingxiu smiled at the flushed Wei Zhang. This last question was the perfect finishing blow. Your Majesty, this old minister misspoke. Duke Qing, sigh. At this moment, Wei Zhang retreated like a defeated rooster, his face full of dejection. Lier barely kept his laughter from spilling out, inwardly feeling delighted. It was just a pity he hadn't been the one to say those words. If he had, the satisfaction would have been overwhelming. Your Majesty, I just submitted the list of names I recommend for promotion. Next time we go to war, they should accompany the army and take the lead in battle. Qingxiu turned to Lier and proposed loudly, let everyone see with their own eyes what kind of talent they are. This way no slanderous courtiers can say I promote only my own people based on my achievements. Dr. Wei, what do you think? This was already undisguised, straightforwardly calling Wei Zhang a treacherous petty man. Wei Zhang replied in a muffled voice, this matter should be decided by your Majesty. I am not in a position to give an opinion. Then as Duke Qing suggests, send them to lead the vanguard in the next battle. I also want to see what talent they have. Lier smiled, by the way, I saw a name on your list, ч22. I heard that during the Lingnan campaign, he led 2,000 men to charge an army of 70,000 and nearly captured Feng'ang. Qingxiu nodded slightly. That is true. Good. This man reminds me of my own spirit when I fought for the empire. Since he is a natural general, he should be given a fitting rank. Let's appoint him. Lier was in the middle of thinking about what rank to grant ч22 when Qingxiu interrupted. Your Majesty need not be too generous. In my view, granting him the rank of 8th rank brave cavalry officer is enough. Lier was immediately full of question marks. Even the civil and military officials in the hall were puzzled. Why wasn't Qingxiu fighting for ч22 at all, and even deliberately assigning him a rank far below his merits? With the achievement of leading 2,000 against 70,000, such a low rank would be enough to enrage anyone on the spot. Everyone knew that whenever one of Qingxiu's men achieved merit for the court, he would try every means to secure them a high reward. So why was he deliberately suppressing ч22 now? Duke Qing, are you joking with me? Or is there some problem with this ч22? No problem. Then why is he not worthy of a higher reward or title? To speak frankly, granting him a 4th rank mighty martial commandant would already be low for his merits, but I do not wish your Majesty to promote him so highly. If your Majesty insists on giving him a higher position, then I can only remove him from the recommendation list. Seeing Qingxiu's serious expression, Lier realized he was not joking. After looking again at the list's information, Lier noticed ч22 was only 18 years old. At once, he understood Qingxiu's well-intentioned restraint. At such a young age, having achieved such great merit, if the court now rewarded him too highly, with his still immature temperament, it would surely make him arrogant and restless. It could even cause his limitless future to be cut short by present vanity. Duke Qing intends to focus on training him? He is indeed a promising talent, worth putting some effort into, Qingxiu said calmly. Rare indeed. If there's a chance in the future, I must meet him as well. After this grand ceremony ended, there was a lavish banquet, and no one discussed state affairs at the feast. During the banquet, Lier, feeling a bit itchy for a game, called Qingxiu and several veteran ministers over to play a round of beast chess with him. It had to be said, Lier truly had talent for this game. Apart from Qingxiu, almost no one was a match for him. After several rounds, he didn't lose a single game, winning so much that his face bloomed with smiles. Duke Qing, I've heard you have a game called Great Fortune Pig at your hot spring villa. Could you bring me one? When it came to Qingxiu's turn to face Lier asked with interest during the game. Of course. I'll have someone send that set over later. But I suggest your Majesty also take time to soak in the hot springs at my villa, it might help relieve your Majesty's rheumatism. Qingxiu placed a piece on the board and spoke lightly. He had noticed that since the start of winter this year, Lier often rubbed his knees with a furrowed brow. Clearly his rheumatism had worsened. I truly would like to go, but there are too many trivial matters in the palace, I really have no time. Lier sighed. He suddenly realized he was about to lose to Qingxiu and hurriedly made his move. It's a pity there's no hot spring to dig up in Chang'an. Otherwise, I would soak every night before sleeping. Wait, how did you win? Lier suddenly saw that his last few moves had all fallen into traps Qingxiu had set earlier. By the time he realized, it was already a dead game. Your Majesty has improved compared to before. Qingxiu placed the decisive winning piece, smiling faintly. Lier patted his forehead. He still hadn't recovered from his earlier streak of victories, and now he had been beaten so miserably in Qingxiu's hands. Haha, still can't beat you. I won't play with you anymore, it's impossible to win. Lier quickly turned to play against Xiaoyu instead. That did it. Almost everyone avoided Qingxiu and chose other opponents, leaving him standing there, sword in hand and looking around in vain. No helping it, he was too unbeatable, and no one wanted to come over just to be crushed. Young Qing, come. Let me see what this is, teach me how to play. Reeking of wine, Cheng Yaojin came over, clearly quite interested in beast chess. All right. Qingxiu had been fretting over having no one to crush. Since old Cheng came over on his own, he couldn't be blamed for being merciless. But while playing against old Cheng, Qingxiu suddenly recalled something Lier had mentioned earlier. If only there could be hot spring water in the palace. The speaker had no particular intention, but the listener took it to heart. Qingxiu couldn't help having an idea pop into his mind. If he could channel hot spring water into the palace, and even into certain high-ranking officials' homes, this would absolutely be a highly promising business. At once, another word popped into his head, running water. If this could be achieved, delivering water continuously to every household so they could draw it without leaving home. It would not only be a major project benefiting the country and the people, but also an extremely profitable venture. To be able to collect money from every drop of water, even if each amount was as tiny as a fly's leg, when multiplied by such a vast base, it would still be an astronomical sum. Make your move, what are you thinking about? Old Cheng's rough voice pulled Qingxiu from his thoughts. Oh, all right. Qingxiu answered casually, placed a piece, and said, you've lost again. What? Cheng Yaojin scratched his head. How is this possible? I've lost 7 games in a row. Not until near evening did the grand banquet finally disperse. When Qingxiu left the Forbidden City, ч22, who had been waiting for a long time, personally stepped forward to greet him. "Boss, the carriage is ready, please." Qingxiu got in, and ч22 himself drove the carriage back to the Duke Qing's residence, chatting animatedly along the way about sparring with the city guards earlier that day. "Boss, I'm telling you, those city guards may all look big and strong, but in a real fight, I can take on at least 5 of them alone. And that so-called drill master from the military academy, he didn't last even 5 rounds against me before going down." Listening to him, Qingxiu suddenly said, "Today I submitted to His Majesty the reward list for the brothers who fought alongside me in Lingnan, and your name is on it." At this, ч22's arm gave a slight tremor. Then how did His Majesty reward me?" ч22's voice was full of anticipation. "His Majesty admires you very much, but your reward is only a 7th-rank brave cavalry officer." Upon hearing this, ч22's whole body stiffened. He thought he had misheard Qingxiu's words. Everyone knew that in the Tang dynasty, the martial spirit was strong. If the emperor saw an especially strong soldier in the army, he would often reward him on the spot. Let alone someone with military merit. And he had achieved such a stunning feat in Lingnan, yet the reward was only a minor 7th-rank military officer. Even with the lowest starting point, such a reward was enough to make people laugh their heads off. Was this still the Tang dynasty, where bravery was the first requirement for rewards? It should be known that before this, ч22 had dreamed countless times about what rank he would be given after this battle, maybe even becoming a general. Such a stark contrast truly was. "Alright, stop letting your thoughts run wild. The reward His Majesty gave you was higher than this. I was the one who rejected it." This shocked ч22 even more. "Boss, why would you do that?" "Why? Because you are not yet worthy of such a high rank. If virtue does not match position, there will be disaster." Qingxiu gave a cold laugh. "Let me ask you, if you were now to lead 10,000 troops on campaign, how would you command them?" "I would, of course. What route would you march? How would you arrange supply lines? How would you allocate cooks, doctors, and various weapons?" Just the first question was enough to render ч22 speechless. In truth, ч22 had very little real military experience. This time, he had followed Duke Qing only as a household officer. Apart from leading charges in battle, all campaign planning, supply allocation, and so on had been handled entirely by Qingxiu. He had never concerned himself with any of these matters. Let alone arranging them. Before Qingxiu mentioned it, he didn't even know there was so much to consider in leading a campaign. In history, the reason ч22 later became a general capable of standing on his own was mainly because he started as an ordinary soldier, rising step by step to general, truly honing himself through years in the army, and becoming familiar with every aspect of military affairs. The current ч22 was nothing more than a young warrior full of courage, still far from having the talent of a true commander. If you were to take the rank His Majesty gave you, I fear that every time you go to war in the future, you would lead 10,000 troops on a march by yourself. If you don't even know how to handle these matters, those elite soldiers with you might lose 7 or 8 out of 10 before even seeing the enemy, so what talk would there be of fighting a battle?" Qingxiu looked at ч22's increasingly stiff back. "If you lose a battle, as the commanding general, your own death wouldn't be a pity, but those 10,000 fine men of the Tang would all have to leave their bones in a foreign land. If it's like that, you might as well just be a vanguard officer charging the front." ч22 mechanically flicked his whip to drive the horse forward. Qingxiu's words had completely overturned his understanding of marching and fighting. "I had always thought that war was simply about rushing forward and crushing the enemy. I didn't expect that keeping the army intact on the march would be even harder." ч22 let out a long sigh. Now he finally understood Qingxiu's painstaking good intentions. But what he hadn't expected on a deeper level was that Qingxiu didn't want him, at such a young age, to reach the peak of pride and success. Otherwise, when falling from the pedestal in the future, the crash would be far worse. Seeing him so moved, Qingxiu knew the boy had finally understood something. "Don't belittle yourself, you're still young." Qingxiu lifted the hanging curtain and patted ч22's shoulder. "You must always remember, one day you must become a great general like Li Jing or Li Ji." At these words, ч22's whole body trembled. That level of ambition was almost beyond his imagination. The thought that he might one day take part in a war to destroy a nation, commanding hundreds of thousands of troops across the battlefield, felt like a dream. Right now, his thought was simply that being able to become a drill master would already be a great fortune in life. Could I become that kind of general? What are you saying? If you don't want to, then pack your things and get out of the duke's residence, don't stay here to disgrace me. Qingxiu scolded with a laugh, and Gue couldn't help but burst into loud laughter as well. I didn't keep you in the Duke Qing's residence just to have you be a household officer. Duke Qing, rest assured. If you expect me to do so, I'll do my utmost. Nonsense, what do you mean, for my expectations? It's for yourself. The two of them chatted and laughed all the way back to Duke Qing's mansion. Gue, in the end, cast a long look back at the walls of the Forbidden City, feeling a sudden sense of anticipation in his heart. If he could one day, like Li Jing, earn merit for destroying a nation, and personally receive an imperial title from the emperor in that moment, what great power and glory that would be. Boss is right. I was meant to become that kind of commander. After the triumphant return ceremony ended, Li Er began sorting the spoils Qingxiu had brought back from this campaign. Besides the household registers and full topography of Lingnan, there were also the corpses of the Feng clan brought back. Li Er had originally planned to keep Feng'ang in Chang'an, like Jelly Khan, as a sort of mascot, but what he received was only a charred corpse. Even burned to charcoal, this Feng'ang's fat still stands out so much. Looking at the most conspicuous fat corpse, Li Er didn't have to guess to know this must be Feng'ang. Your Majesty, as Duke Qing said, all the corpses of the Feng clan are here, except Feng Jida, the coroner reported to Li Er. Why is this one missing? Ah? The coroner's expression turned evasive. Duke Qing said he already took care of Feng Jida's corpse, so there's nothing for us. Li Er didn't have to think to know how Qingxiu had taken care of it, so he asked no further. Speaking of it, these people had some backbone. Not willing to come to Chang'an to surrender and be humiliated, they burned themselves instead. That Feng'ang was a character. Your Majesty, I think not. When I was inspecting the corpses, I found that more or less they all had traces of kerosene and gunpowder. The coroner carefully lifted the clothing fused to the body, showing Li Er. At this, Li Er was slightly startled. Nothing more needed to be said. It seemed that Qingxiu's campaign this time had carried a bit of personal grudge. Li Er couldn't help thinking that Feng'ang was truly unlucky. He had run headlong into the iron plate that was Qingxiu. And now, not only had he lost his life, but the entire Feng bloodline had been wiped out. They accidentally ignited gunpowder and burned themselves, understand? Li Er gave the coroner a faint glance. This matter ends here. Don't tell anyone. I understand. The coroner instantly understood Li Er's meaning and ordered his men to put the corpses away. Meanwhile, the aftermath in Lingnan went far smoother than Qingxiu had expected. He had thought it would take much time to erase the resistance and resentment of this land, and had even prepared to request that Li Er send troops to station there for suppression. But unexpectedly, over the next month, Lingnan accepted Tang's reorganization and officials with extreme ease. There was no trouble at all. They even welcomed Tang's control, showing how badly they had been oppressed and exploited by Feng'ang before. At the same time, Qingxiu personally selected a group of officials, drafted their list, and submitted it to Li Er, hoping they would govern Lingnan. Most of those he chose were obscure in officialdom yet extremely capable. Sending them to Lingnan would be a special training. Before they departed, Qingxiu held a feast for them and explained how to govern Lingnan. His time controlling Lingnan was limited, so he had to fully plan its governance in that short time to ensure it never rebelled again. By the time Qingxiu had completed his initial governance plan for Lingnan and sent the officials off, it was already early spring in March. This year, the rains had come early, and the temperature had risen quickly. By March the trees were already lush, as if summer had come overnight. In Chang'an, peach blossoms bloomed everywhere, making for a unique sight. Qingxiu naturally didn't want to miss such a fine time. He asked Li Er for a long vacation and took his wives to travel the mountains and rivers. Especially Su Xiaochun, before giving birth, she had been so cautious she didn't even dare leave the mansion gates. Now, finally able to go out, she relaxed and enjoyed herself to the fullest. Qingxiu even delayed the end of their trip for a few days just for her. He also prepared special hot spring baths for her, accompanying her for 4 whole days until she was fully satisfied. Thus, Su Xiaochun finally made up for the regret of being unable to fully enjoy herself during pregnancy. Just as Qingxiu was returning to Chang'an with his wives and concubines, he saw that many scholars and talented men from all over the Tang Empire had come to the city. As if inspired by something, more and more of them were gathering here, even filling up all the inns and taverns in Chang'an. Later arrivals who could not find lodging could only stay temporarily in the surrounding villages. This isn't the time for the imperial examinations. Why are there so many scholars in Chang'an? Changsun Pingting was quite surprised. She had never seen so many scholars in the city before. Qingxiu smiled. It's early spring in March. Do you know why there are so many scholars? The Furong Garden Poetry Gathering. Chang Sun Pingting suddenly understood, no wonder. This annual spring poetry gathering seemed on the surface to be just a private banquet for scholars to compose and match poems. But in fact, because in past years many talented men had stood out and amazed others at this event, even the imperial court had taken interest in it. Many high-ranking officials and noble families also took a liking to those who emerged from the poetry gathering. They even treated it as a son-in-law selection event. Those with outstanding talent would surely be recruited by prominent families. Even if they weren't taken as sons-in-law, it was still an opportunity to get closer to them or take them as protégés. When these talents later shone in officialdom, it would certainly be a great advantage. Husband, I really want to go see the poetry gathering. Cui Yuyan held Qingxiu's hand and spoke softly, acting spoiled. Born into a scholarly family, she naturally had great interest in such an event. All right, if you're interested, you can even take part. I've heard the Furong Garden Poetry Gathering doesn't forbid women. Really? Cui Yuyan's eyes lit up, but she still looked a bit uneasy. But as far as I know, from the very first gathering until now, there has never been a female poet attending. If it's not forbidden, then it's allowed. Even if they don't allow it, I'll make them allow it. Qingxiu spoke carelessly. Thank you, husband. Cui Yuyan said happily. In truth, Qingxiu himself was also quite interested in this poetry gathering. The Tang dynasty was famed for literature, perhaps he might even meet many familiar faces here. And he had always been interested in poetry and literature, so he wanted to see what level these people could reach. Chang Sun Pingting seemed rather impatient. Then shall we go take a look now? What's the rush? The gathering is still 3 days away. If we go now, there's nothing to see. Although he said that, the streets of Chang'an were already full of scholars composing poems, matching verses, and debating with one another. Qingxiu could often overhear them challenging each other with poetic questions, but their level was hardly worth praising. It seemed the real top-quality work would only appear once the actual gathering began, so Qingxiu was in no hurry. As the date of the gathering approached, discussions in Chang'an grew more intense by the day. Even in the imperial court, during idle moments, ministers would talk about who would be the true highlight of this year's event. Some ministers even planned to participate themselves. Among them, Hou Junji was perhaps the most eager. He still had an unmarried daughter, Hou Haitang, who was of marriageable age but had no match. It wasn't that Hou Junji was unwilling to marry her off, rather, the young lady had loved poetry and literature from an early age, and her skill in it was very high. Her primary requirement for a future husband was that his poetry and literature must far surpass her own. Previously, no matter how distinguished the young men introduced to her were, every one of them had been defeated in the realm of poetry and literature. All were astonished that a girl of only 16 could have such outstanding skill in verse. For this reason, even though Hou Haitang was of age to marry, she still had no husband to this day. When Hou Junji returned home from court, the first thing he did was excitedly tell Hou Haitang about the Furong Garden Poetry Gathering. Don't you love poetry and literature the most? There are many outstanding young men there every year. If you see one you like, I can help match you. At that moment, Hou Haitang was fully focused on a poem she was writing. The young girl's graceful figure was upright as she wrote stroke by stroke, her beautiful eyes entirely fixed on the sheet before her. Hou Junji had no choice but to wait patiently until she finished the last stroke. It had to be said, Hou Junji truly doted on this youngest daughter. Finally done. Hou Haitang put down her brush, happily picked up the paper, and handed it to Hou Junji. Father, look, how is this ode to the heavenly stars I wrote? Good, very good. Now, what do you think about what I just mentioned? Hou Haitang pouted in dissatisfaction. Her delicate face was full of reluctance. Father, you didn't even look, how do you know it's good? I looked. I'll take it back and read it carefully later. Now, about the poetry gathering. I'm not going. Hou Haitang refused outright without even thinking. They're all useless. So-called talented scholars, they're all frauds. Her face showed complete disdain. Though her words were a bit extreme, she did have the right to say them. In the past, Hou Haitang had been very interested in the talented men of previous gatherings. But when she collected their poems and read them, she found they were far inferior to her own. This wasn't just self-satisfaction, almost everyone who compared agreed her poetry was superior. As a result, she lost interest in those so-called talents. Hou Junji felt a headache coming on. There's no one in all of Chang'an you find acceptable, and you insist on waiting for someone better at poetry than you. When will that ever happen? If you never find one, will you stay unmarried forever? If I don't marry, I don't marry. I'll stay in the mansion with father forever. Hou Haitang said playfully. Enough. Just listen to me this once, go and see. Even if you don't find anyone, it won't hurt you. It's settled. Not giving her a chance to argue, Ho Junji got up, closed the door, and left. Ho Haitang was immediately displeased and muttered to herself. He says he's asking for my opinion, but in the end he decides everything himself. She thought with scorn that she would just go through the motions to please her father. As for finding someone she liked, she didn't even bother thinking about it. Under much anticipation, this year's spring poetry gathering in Furong Garden finally began. Unlike before, this year even the court got involved, sending Fang Xianling and Du Ruhui to serve as judges. This news made the expectant scholars all the more excited. There was no doubt that this showed the imperial court had also begun to value the Furong Garden poetry gathering. If one could perform well in this event, it would surely draw the court's attention, and might even directly pave the way for an official career in the future. Even Qingxiu now found his interest in this place growing. He truly wanted to see how the court planned to select from among these talented men. When Qingxiu arrived at Furong Garden with Cui Yuyan, the place was already crowded with talented men skilled in poetry and literature. Passing through winding paths, they saw that on the waters of Furong Garden there were many boats drifting slowly. Many scholars were composing poems while sitting by the flowing water, drinking and enjoying themselves. The atmosphere was lively. Of course, Ho Junji had also brought his extremely unwilling daughter Ho Haitang here, the father and daughter riding a small boat along the shore. Is there no one you think is especially good? I thought that young man earlier wrote quite well, won't you go take a look? Ho Junji hadn't been idle this whole trip. He was constantly looking around, sizing up people's skill, and recommending them to Ho Haitang. Just so. What about this one? Thinking of the bright moon he wrote just now was truly good, why don't you go speak to him? His poetry is flowery but hollow, without substance, not worth looking at. At this moment, Ho Haitang just wanted to quickly finish this trip to Furong Garden. What talented men! They were all a bunch of pigs. As she thought this, her gaze casually swept toward the shore. And suddenly she was drawn to a young man of outstanding bearing. The young man was handsome, and his manner was far superior to those pedantic scholars and self-proclaimed talents. In particular, every movement of his somehow made it hard for Ho Haitang to look away. She even found herself wanting to glance at him more and more. At his side was a woman of stunning beauty, with a figure so perfect it was alluring. The two of them, speaking and laughing along the way, had the air of a well-matched pair. Even though the man's eyes were covered with a black gauze scarf, as if he could not see, it did not hide his brilliance, nor affect his extraordinary charm. Ho Haitang suddenly realized she had been staring at the man for a long time. She quickly withdrew her gaze and shyly lowered her head. She strangely felt her cheeks growing warm, and her heart was beating wildly. What's happening to me? This strange feeling was the first time for Ho Haitang. She herself could hardly believe it. Just one glance from the crowd, and she was inexplicably affected. Yet the man clearly looked like someone who already had a family. Isn't that Duke Qing? He's here too. Ho Junji also saw the man and blurted it out. He's Duke Qing, Qingxiu? Ho Haitang's eyes were full of surprise, and she looked again. She had heard rumors about Qingxiu before, but had never seen him in person. She had only heard that his household had many wives and concubines, all of them beauties that made others envious. She had thought Qingxiu had won them over only through his noble status and sweet words. But seeing him today, she immediately understood why those women would be so devoted to him, even willing to share him with others. Thinking this, Ho Haitang couldn't resist wanting to glance at Qingxiu again, but when she looked up, the small boat had already gone past, and he was nowhere in sight. Father! I just saw someone whose poetry was very good, turn the boat around. Ho Haitang hurriedly grabbed Ho Junji's arm and spoke. All right. Ho Junji almost shed tears of joy. Finally, a young talent who could catch his daughter's eye. He immediately ordered the boatman to turn around, while asking repeatedly which person it was. However, when they rowed back again, Qingxiu was already gone in the crowd, nowhere to be seen. Can't find him, where did he go? Ho Haitang was so anxious that fine beads of sweat appeared on her forehead, and Ho Junji was even more anxious than his daughter. Just then, all the people in Furong Garden began crowding toward the central lotus platform. Clearly, the poetry gathering was about to begin. All right, daughter, let's go take a look first, maybe we'll run into him. Seeing his daughter on the verge of tears, Ho Junji quickly tried to comfort her. It was the first time he had seen Ho Haitang so impatient. In his heart he felt both pity and secret delight. If this young man could truly win his daughter's favor, wouldn't that settle her marriage matter right away? All right, then let's hurry. Ho Haitang quickly agreed. It was obvious she was truly anxious. As Qingxiu walked along, though he saw some with better literary skill, none could enter his eyes. After all, he knew ancient poetry thoroughly. Compared to that, even the most talented person in this little Furong garden could hardly match the vast library of poetry in his mind. Still, those talented men who recognized Qingxiu treated him with great respect, and many wanted to approach him to get acquainted. Duke Qing, are you here this time as the court's representative to inspect the gathering? If it's convenient, perhaps later you could look at my poetry and give me some pointers. Why not come sit on our little boat for a while? We've prepared fine yellow wine, I guarantee you've never had any like it. Taking advantage of the fact that the gathering on the Furong platform was starting, Qingxiu declined them one by one. He had no desire to waste time on these people. Master Qing. Master Qing. Just as he reached the Furong platform, Qingxiu heard a very familiar voice calling to him. Following the sound, he saw a lively and pretty young girl he recognized, waving to him excitedly from the crowd. It's Song Qingyu, she's here too. Qingxiu was a little surprised. Hee. Master Qing, you're interested in this as well. Song Qingyu happily came over to stand beside Qingxiu. This must be Sister Cui? You're truly beautiful, you look perfect together with Master Qing. Hearing this, Cui Yuyan instantly warmed to the girl and smiled. You flatter me, it's only because my husband favors me. No way. Song Qingyu then asked Qingxiu excitedly, Master Qing, did you come this time to compete in poetry and literature? I'm only here to watch the excitement, Qingxiu replied with a faint smile. As they spoke, the sound of zither came from the Furong platform, announcing the start of the poetry gathering. Talented men crowded around in layers, and the few seats at the very front had been bought outright by those with deep backgrounds or generous spending. The closer to the front, the more they could attract attention. Can't see. Cui Yuyan looked from afar, unable to clearly see what was on the platform, her expression rather disappointed. Seeing this, Qingxiu didn't rush. Instead, he called over a guard nearby. What are your orders, Duke Qing? The guard asked with utmost respect. Go and get me a seat, one where we can see the stage clearly. The clearer, the better. Qingxiu gave the order casually, as if directly treating the guard like a household servant. His words were overheard by the scholars nearby, and each of them was astonished. Any seat in the front row was extremely expensive, yet Qingxiu could have one just by speaking? This humble one has no authority to arrange it, but I will gladly inquire for Duke Qing. Please wait here for a moment. The guard dared not neglect the matter and immediately went forward to report it. The news quickly reached the host of the gathering, Chen Fangqing, who at once could not sit still. Duke Qing himself is here. Why didn't you tell me earlier? We've been neglecting him all this time. Chen Fangqing scolded urgently. Then, shall we arrange a seat for Duke Qing in the front row? Just one seat to fob off Duke Qing? Have you no brain? Without wasting words, Chen Fangqing left the stage and personally pushed through the crowd. Seeing him come, the scholars and talented men quickly stepped aside for him. Only when they saw him arrive before Qingxiu did they understand why Chen Fangqing was acting so deferentially. This was an extremely high-ranking figure. Duke Qing, your honored arrival, I failed to welcome you from afar, please forgive me. Chen Fangqing greeted him with a smile. Please follow me, we have a fine seat prepared. That's not necessary. Very well. From the prime space at the front of the stage, a small chair was moved out to the side, for Chen Fangqing himself to sit. As for his original, most luxurious seat, he directly gave it to Qingxiu and his two companions, letting them sit in the most prestigious place. This treatment truly made the scholars below watch with tears in their eyes. Those with rank and status were indeed treated differently. Duke Qing, how have you been? Didn't expect you to come today, why didn't you tell us? So Duke Qing also enjoys poetry and literature. As soon as they sat down, people next to them immediately greeted them. Following the voices, they saw it was the judges Fang Xianling and Du Ruhui, and also Hou Junji, who had somehow arrived as well. What a coincidence. Greetings, gentlemen. Qingxiu smiled. You each had reserved seats, while I had to have mine arranged on the spot. Hou Junji laughed. Duke Qing, what are you saying? We simply informed the host before we came. If we had known you were coming, how could we dare neglect you? As they chatted, Hou Junji's daughter Hou Haitang, seated beside him, never took her eyes off Qingxiu, though she tried to look only in secret. Qingxiu, of course, noticed this small detail. When their eyes happened to meet, Hou Haitang's cheeks instantly turned crimson, and she quickly looked away. I greet Duke Qing. I've long heard that the Hou family's young lady is outstanding in both beauty and talent. Seeing you today proves it true. Are you here to compete for the title of first talent in Furong Garden? Not really. That's an overstatement from others. I just came to see how the other talents in Chang'an fare. If Duke Qing also enjoys poetry and literature, I don't mind composing a poem for you. Hearing Qingxiu speak to her, the usually calm and composed young lady suddenly showed a girlish side, her speech halting and uneven. After speaking, she shyly lowered her head, wondering if she had been too forward. What if Duke Qing didn't like poetry? Oh no. While they spoke, the poetry contest had already begun. To the sound of a graceful zither, Chen Fangqing personally wrote a few characters and posted them on the display board. The 2 characters read, Winter Snow. When the topic was revealed, all the talented men below frowned in concentration. Some began writing on paper, others discussed ideas with one another. Du Ruhui explained to Qingxiu, in the poetry gathering, the host personally gives the topic for each round, and the participants must compose poetry to match it. Those who gain the unanimous approval of the judges and the audience are considered winners of that round. Qingxiu nodded slightly. So it's testing impromptu skill? He noticed Ho Haitang's eyes suddenly sharpen with focus. She took up brush and paper and began writing quickly, clearly she had already been inspired. Master Qing, you should compose a poem too, beat them all. Song Qingyu urged excitedly. No need. Better to leave them some dignity. Qingxiu smiled faintly. Soon, one sheet after another was passed to the front, first to the preliminary reviewers. If they thought it was incoherent rubbish, they would throw it out immediately, only those they found pleasing would be passed to the judges. No way. My Ode to White Snow in Spring was so good, why was it rejected? The terrible handwriting alone makes it painful to look at, not to mention the nonsense content. You just forced rhymes without meaning, I'm sparing you by not scolding you more. Sir, please look at mine, you'll surely like it. Get as far away as you can. And wipe the ink stains clean first. Seeing their painstaking masterpieces thrown out like trash, some were heartbroken. But truthfully, what they wrote was only fit to be called trash. Even those passed to the judges were barely tolerable. Halfway through reading, Qingxiu felt continuing would only hurt his eyes. This Ode to the Winter Sun is good. Du Ruhui suddenly held one up and smiled. If nothing unexpected happens, this should be the best. Yes, very well written. At a glance, Qingxiu also found it refreshing. Though not equal to the works of the greatest masters, it could certainly take first place in this gathering. Du Ruhui was about to announce this as the best when a soft, pleasant voice spoke, Lord Du, why not also look at mine? The voice drew their eyes, and they saw it was Ho Haitang. The young lady held a sheet of rice paper in her hands, confidently offering it for review. Let me see. Qingxiu was the first to take it. At a glance, he couldn't help exclaiming in praise, a fine piece. Its imagery was deep, the words well integrated, in the poetry he knew from ancient to modern times, it was at least of the second tier. Especially given that it came from a girl of only 17 or 18, it was even more astonishing. If Ho Haitang is trained well, even if she doesn't become a genius like Li Bai or Du Fu, she could at least secure a place on the level of Lu Yong, Qingxiu thought to himself. As he thought this, he glanced at Ho Haitang again. And saw that she was still looking at him, especially when she heard his praise, her face lit with excitement. As long as Master Qing likes it, of course, everyone else must like it too. Ho Junji said proudly, well, gentlemen, is my daughter's skill passable? Passable? Her Deep Snow is much better than the Ode to the Winter Sun, in my opinion. Not necessarily, I think the two are about equal. After some discussion, they finally decided that Ho Haitang's Deep Snow would win. Ho Haitang's face was full of smiles, not because her poem had been judged first place, but more because Qingxiu had taken a liking to her poem and given it high praise. As a genius girl, she had grown up hearing all kinds of compliments and flattery. But now every word of praise from Qingxiu made her inexplicably excited. Deep Snow should be the first for this topic. The author is Ho Haitang. Du Ruhui announced loudly the winner of the poem. At first, when people heard someone had taken first place, they were dissatisfied, each looking eager to challenge. But when they learned the author was Ho Haitang, one by one they no longer had the earlier indignation. They might not accept the work of others, but if it came from the hands of the number one talented woman in the Tang dynasty today, they had no qualification to criticize. Although Ho Haitang was a woman, this poetry gathering had no rule forbidding women from participating. Besides, since they couldn't even surpass a woman, how could they still have the face to protest? But just because they accepted it didn't mean everyone would. Especially the contestant defeated by Ho Haitang. My Ode to the Winter Sun, why is it inferior to hers? From the crowd, a figure stood up, loudly expressing dissatisfaction. His voice at once drew everyone's eyes to him. It was clear this was the author of Ode to the Winter Sun. When Qingxiu and the others saw him, their eyes lit up. This fellow was Li Tai. Somehow this boy had slipped out of the palace and come to join the fun at the poetry gathering. Of course, they recognized Li Tai. But others almost knew nothing of him, and few could recognize his identity. Friend, losing to Miss Ho is no disgrace, you've already done well enough. That's right, think of your own level, think of her talent, how can you compare? Better sit down early, brother. Hearing the people's persuasion and comments, Li Tai became even more unconvinced. His poetic talent was also top tier. Though he had heard of Ho Haitang's reputation, he had always believed she could not match him. But in reality, he had been defeated in the very first round. How could he accept that? They were both geniuses, why should he fear her? No wonder I thought Ode to the Winter Sun was well written, so it was this boy. Qingxiu laughed loudly, then called out from afar, you boy. You came but didn't come find me. Master Qing. Li Tai's face lit with joy, but then suddenly thinking of something, he quickly waved at Qingxiu. The meaning couldn't be more obvious, he didn't want to reveal his identity, and begged Qingxiu not to expose him. Otherwise, he'd have no chance to stay here and play. This boy, he's learned from his old man to go out in disguise. Qingxiu didn't expose him either. Wei, cough, Li Qingke, your dissatisfaction is understandable. But our panel of judges unanimously agreed, how could that be wrong? Fang Xianling nearly blurted out the man's real identity. My poem's imagery is no worse than hers, only hers is softer between the lines. Lacking the boldness and freedom poetry should have. How can that be better than mine? Speaking thus, Li Tai quickly wrote out his poem again, asking everyone to pass it around for viewing, comparing it directly to Ho Haitang's. This boy was not being presumptuous because of his prince's identity. It was entirely from a poet's confidence and competitive spirit. The gap between the two poems was already close to nothing. After reading them, many felt Li Tai was not weaker than Ho Haitang. Some even supported Li Tai's poem as better. Daughter, you've truly met your match today, this Li Qingxiu's talent is extraordinary. In the PAL, in public occasions, he's considered by all to be the most gifted. Ho Junji laughed. Ho Haitang didn't care at all. They simply don't understand my poetry. Why not let Qingke take the win, his is far better than Miss Haitang's. Yes, letting a woman beat us really doesn't look good. In any case, we appreciate Qingxiu's poem more. The voices gradually shifted toward Li Tai. And not only because his poem was well written. That a young woman could outshine all the men present truly made them lose face. And she was only 17 or 18. Even for the sake of their pride, they had to support Li Tai. Even if I acknowledge it, that's still not enough? Qingxiu rose slowly. And the moment they saw him stand, everyone instantly had the sense to shut their mouths. Master Qing is absolutely right. Whether or not Li Tai accepted losing to Ho Haitang. Once Qingxiu spoke, he dared not utter another unnecessary word. Even if Qingxiu told him to pick up his paper and pen and get out right now, he would not dare say a thing. Poetry cannot be judged only on the surface. Ho Haitang's work truly surpasses yours. I say she wrote better than you. With Master Qing's judgment, I have no further words. Li Tai responded at once. His earlier arrogance gone. As expected, only Master Qing truly appreciates poetry. Ho Haitang smiled happily, no matter what others said. It was enough that Qingxiu admired her. Yes, Miss Haitang's is indeed better, haha. The others quickly changed their tone to agree, they wouldn't dare contradict Qingxiu. Even if they didn't say it aloud, Qingxiu could guess well enough. They weren't truly convinced, and many surely thought he was favoring an insider. Bring ink and brush. Qingxiu ordered, and Chen Fangqing personally brought paper and brush. Duke Qing is going to write himself? With so many talented people here, how could I judge them without some learning myself? Qingxiu flicked his sleeve, took up the brush, and prepared to write. Master Qing. Since you cannot see, why don't you say it and I'll write for you? Ho Haitang quickly stepped forward to help. No matter, I'm used to being blind. It's only writing a little something, no problem. Qingxiu searched his mind carefully, slowing his movement slightly. Not because he couldn't think of anything, but because with countless works from the greatest poets of all ages in his mind, he had a bit of choice paralysis. I'll write this one then. Having decided, Qingxiu wrote swiftly. His strokes neat and quick, writing out the poem line by line. At the end, he lifted the paper, examined it closely, and was very satisfied. This poem is called Returning to the Old Mountain in Winter. A humble offering, please don't laugh at it. All the while, Ho Haitang had been watching from behind him, her expression changing from delight, to surprise, to pure shock. The level of this poem was so high that she could not even come close. She couldn't imagine anyone being able to write something like this. Good, such good poetry, truly good poetry. I had never heard of Duke Qing writing poetry. Seeing it today makes this young woman feel utterly ashamed. Ho Haitang's gaze toward Qingxiu became extremely complicated. In Ho Haitang's eyes, there was both admiration and respect for Qingxiu, as well as a trace of disappointment. She had always believed that no one in this world could match her talent, yet today she had truly met such a person. And it happened to be someone she had already inexplicably felt affection for before. Under such circumstances, she instead felt that she might not be able to match Qingxiu. The young girl's heart began to race. She quietly sized up Qingxiu, the blush on her jade-like face flickering. Would you recite it aloud for everyone to hear? Qingxiu handed it to Qing. The latter, after just one glance, could not help but exclaim loudly. What talent! This poem should without doubt be judged first place. These words instantly drew everyone's attention. Even Li Tai craned his neck, eager to know what the poem was like. Untainted by dust, returning to the fragrant grass. A green vine path, 10,000 snow peaks in clear light. The first line already caught everyone's attention, and all held their breath as Qing read it out line by line. The more they listened, the more the gathered scholars' admiration for Qingxiu rose. They had never expected the Duke of Qing's poetry to be so stunningly exceptional. By comparison, what they had written was simply garbage. Li Tai's feelings shifted from shock to admiration, convinced from the heart. Only now did he realize that his own talent was merely so. What a fine poem! Duke Qing's talent is far beyond our reach. If Duke Qing had written this earlier, what would we even be judging? He would be first. With this one poem, he could easily claim the title of First Talented Scholar of the Year. The more they listened, the more they were moved and impressed. Washing the inkstone to plan good strategies, tapping the pine to emulate Suzhen. At this time once again, merging with the three pure ones. After finishing the reading, even Qing felt a great sense of satisfaction. This poem, in both depth of imagery and richness of diction, was unquestionably top tier. Even merely reading it aloud felt wonderfully refreshing. With such talent, Duke Qing, why don't you compete for the title of First Talented Scholar? I had no intention to show off before you all, this was just a spur-of-the-moment thing. Qingxiu's expression was calm, though inside he felt somewhat pleased, but did not show it. The poetry of Li Bai was, to these people, a crushing blow from another dimension. How could they even compete? Everyone, may I now have the qualification to judge who should be first? As soon as these words were spoken, the whole venue fell silent. No one said a word, they all felt unworthy. Convinced. Master Qing, no one has more authority than you. Li Tai respectfully gave Qingxiu a salute. This was not an act for appearance's sake, it was genuine, heartfelt respect. I even think Master Qing is more deserving of the top spot than I am. Ho Haitang looked shyly at Qingxiu. That wouldn't do. I only came to watch the fun, how could I claim such a thing? Qingxiu smiled openly and sat down, signaling Qing to announce the result. The winner of this round, Miss Ho Haitang. Although the name announced was Ho Haitang's, in everyone's heart they silently repeated Qingxiu's name. Even Ho Haitang was no exception. Qing was about to set the topic for the next round. But upon seeing Qingxiu beside him, he suddenly changed his mind. Duke Qing, why don't we switch to another format? You provide the first half of a poem, and the others will compose the second half. Whoever's work pleases your eye will be the winner, how about that? In that instant, Qing had figured it out clearly. With such a star attraction by his side, and one universally acknowledged as the greatest poet present, he had to seize the opportunity. He directly handed both the right to set the challenge and to judge over to Qingxiu. This way there would be no disputes, and the atmosphere would be lifted to a peak. Me? Qingxiu looked toward the other judges behind him, only to see them all wearing embarrassed expressions. Though they were effectively being turned into decorations, Qingxiu indeed had the qualification, so they had no objections. As for the gathered scholars and poets, they were thrilled. This meant more chances to see Qingxiu compose poetry. Some might even get to append their own lines to his poem. Even if they were not chosen, it would be a great honor. In the future they could boast, once, I wrote a continuation to the Duke of Qing's poem. Yes. Master Qing, write it quickly, I want to see it, quickly. Even Song Qingyu, busy eating snacks, clapped her hands happily. She had always loved watching lively events, especially when they involved people she knew. Duke Qing, please write several. We all want to see more of your poetry, it would be our honor. With everyone calling out one after another, Qingxiu began to feel the itch in his hands. Why not write a few then? Without hesitation, he picked up the brush, dipped it in ink, and began writing swiftly. Ho Haitang hurried forward to grind the ink for him, while cautiously stealing glances at the focused Qingxiu. Master Qing hasn't been looking at me the whole time, right? I wonder what impression he has of me. Miss Haitang? Just as Ho Haitong's thoughts were wandering, almost dazed, Qingxiu suddenly spoke, startling her, and caught the inkstone in her hands just as it was about to fall to the ground. Only then did she realize that she had nearly dropped it without noticing. I didn't mean to, Master Qing. Ho Haitong's pretty face flushed bright red with anxiety, and she spoke quickly. No matter. At that moment, Qingxiu also finished his calligraphy. He blew the ink dry and nodded in satisfaction. Please have a look. Qingxiu handed it to Qing, whose expression upon reading it was even more shocked than before. He truly hadn't expected Qingxiu to keep surprising him again and again. This poem was far better than the previous one. Please pass it around for everyone to read. And each of you copy the first part, then write a matching second part. If your writing is too poor, don't continue and bring disgrace upon yourself. It was the first time Qing had spoken so bluntly. In truth, this poem by Qingxiu was only the first half. But in Qing's heart, it was already close to divine. He didn't believe anyone present could write a matching second half. Even reaching 50% of its imagery would be hard. This poem is titled, The Hard Road to Shu. As you all know, I once campaigned in Lingnan, passing through Shu, and truly saw with my own eyes the hardships of the road there. I felt moved, and so I wrote this poem. Qingxiu smiled faintly. Just as he expected, when this poem was passed into the hands of the gathered scholars, it caused an immediate sensation. After reading it, they suddenly understood. So poetry could be written like this. It far exceeded their previous understanding of poetry. I won't continue this poem. I don't think I could possibly write a matching second half. I give up too, trying would be an insult to this poem. A large number of people, after merely reading the first part, immediately declared they would not write further. They did not want to embarrass themselves. Many who had been eager to try now felt intimidated at this moment. These verses were already beyond the level they could touch. Let me take a look. Although Li Tai admitted to himself that his poetry was not as good as Qingxiu's, at the very least, he thought he might barely manage to try continuing it. But just from one glance, even with Li Tai's composure, he could not help exclaiming loudly. Isu 11, how perilously high it is. The difficulty of the road to Shu is greater than ascending to the blue heavens. From Kinsong to Yufu, how vague and distant the founding of the state. Since then, for 48,000 years, there has been no human contact beyond the Qin frontier. Compared with the gentle, smooth style of the previous poem, this hard road to Shu was filled with grandeur and vastness. Its imagery incomparably profound. It hardly seemed like the work of the same poet as before. The ability to switch styles so freely. This too was a supreme poetic skill. At least, Li Tai admitted he was far behind in this regard. The entire poem was magnificent and resplendent. Even though Li Tai had never set foot in Shu, he could still imagine from these words the grandeur and peril of the road to Shu. Touching the stars of Shen and Jing, looking up and holding one's breath. Placing a hand on the chest, sitting long in sighs. The poem stopped abruptly here, and Li Tai instantly felt maddened. It was like savoring a fine dish in hunger, just reaching the peak of flavor, only to have the plate taken away. The huge contrast made even someone usually so mindful of his composure grab his hair in frustration. His heart itched unbearably. If the occasion allowed, he would have gone straight up to ask Qingxiu to finish the second half and satisfy him. At the same time, Ho Haitong, who was carefully reading Qingxiu's calligraphy, rested her forehead in mild distress. She felt exactly the same as Li Tai. It was just not enough. If you feel you can't absolutely match it, even capturing a bit of its charm is acceptable. Seeing that no one dared to put brush to paper, Qing tried to ease the situation. There's no need for everyone to belittle themselves. After all, this is the Duke of Qing's poem, failing to match it is no shame. With that reassurance, everyone was less restrained than before. A few whose poetry was decent finally dared to pick up their brushes and attempt the second half. But no matter how many times they wrote, they felt extremely dissatisfied. Crossing out and revising over and over. This is just too hard to follow. They looked at one another and gave wry smiles. If earlier they still had thoughts of competing with each other, now they only wanted to see someone finish the second half. After much thought, Li Tai finally began writing cautiously. But even after a few words, he paused again to ponder. Seeing Li Tai writing, Ho Haitong carefully asked Qingxiu, Master Qing, if what I write is not very good, could you please not blame me? Of course not. Everyone is pooling ideas, I want to see what you all can come up with. Qingxiu smiled faintly. Before they realized it, this contest for the title of first talented scholar had turned into a kind of team battle between all the poets of Chang'an and Qingxiu. Ironically, as long as they could reach even half the level Qingxiu had shown, they could win the title of first talented scholar of Chang'an. Of course, even then, the prestige was not to be underestimated. And most of them felt they could not reach that level. Might this old man have a try? Just as everyone was racking their brains, a somewhat aged voice came from outside the crowd. An old man with white hair but vigorous spirit walked in from the edge of the crowd, guards at his side parting the people and respectfully leading him forward. When the old man appeared, the entire venue went silent. The poets all stepped aside respectfully, no one raising their voice. Yu Shernan. Qingxiu recognized him immediately. He was not only one of the 24 meritorious officials of Lingyan Pavilion, but also a famous poet of the early Tang. In the Wuda era, he was already a household name in Chang'an. If Li Tai and Hou Haitang were the first tier of the new generation, then Yu Shernan was the unshakable number one of the old generation. Duke of Qing, it has been a long time. Lately I've been in poor health and haven't attended court, but you seem in much better spirits than before. Yu Shernan smiled kindly at Qingxiu. I didn't expect the Duke of Qing to also excel in poetry. A little, not enough to call excelling. Is Mr. Yu also interested in this poetry gathering? Qingxiu replied politely. In past years I always attended the poetry gathering. Only this year my health was poor, so I arrived late. Yu Shernan sat beside Qingxiu, his gaze full of interest. I just heard them reciting The Hard Road to Shu. It is indeed a superb work. I fear there is no one else in Chang'an today with such outstanding talent as the Duke of Qing. At this, Yu Shernan's expression grew extremely serious. He was clearly not making polite talk. At least in his own judgment, even he could not have written such a poem. Mr. Yu flatters me. Why not try it yourself? Qingxiu smiled. Yu Shernan indeed had this intention. He had been watching from not far away, thinking there were few talents this year worth his notice. But Qingxiu's successive high-level poems made him unable to sit still. He even wanted to try in person. Greetings, Elder Yu. Hou Haitang and Li Tai both rose to their feet. When Yu Shernan saw Li Tai, he looked surprised, but noticing Qingxiu subtly signaling him, he immediately understood. I didn't expect you two youngsters to be here. Today is truly a gathering of bright stars. Even more interesting than past year's poetry events. Yu Shernan became even more spirited. Only a contest among masters could stir his interest. Elder Yu, please take up the brush and try. Chen Fangqing urged at once. Not only he, but many in the crowd joined in. They all wanted to witness it. To see Yu Shernan leave behind his calligraphy. This alone made the trip worthwhile. Then, this old man will make a humble attempt. He took up the brush, frowning slightly as he pondered. Clearly, even for him, continuing this poem was no small challenge. Seeing Yu Shernan prepare to write, Li Tai and Hou Haitang also grew tense. The two lowered their heads again, straining their minds over the characters before them, thinking how to continue the work. Seeing even Yu Shernan spending such effort to compose, they felt even more admiration for Qingxiu. To make the foremost talents of the time furrow their brows. Surely in all Chang'an, only he could do so. Even if today the title of first talented scholar of the Tang fell to someone else, no one would question whether Qingxiu deserved it. After a bout of intense deliberation, Li Tai, Hou Haitang, and Yu Shernan all stopped writing almost at the same time. Yet even so, they still frowned at the paper before them, clearly dissatisfied. They had done their utmost, but there was still a great gap between them and Qingxiu. Please, everyone, take a look. If you think someone's continuation is the best, then that person will be the winner. Chen Fangqing instructed for the works to be passed around for all to see. Everyone hurried forward to look one by one, but after reading, their expressions all looked, well. It wasn't that the three had written badly. If taken alone, each would surely be considered a fine piece, even widely praised. But because the continuation was following Qingxiu's top-level masterpiece, the comparison before and after truly felt like a public execution. It wasn't that their skills were lacking, but that Qingxiu's were towering. Frankly, none of them wanted to pick a winner from among the three. However, as all three were people of status, no one wanted to offend them. After weighing things, they began to vote, though the crowd's enthusiasm was noticeably lacking. Everyone, there's no need to vote. Yu Shernan suddenly spoke, cutting off the voting process. I think the three of us are simply unable to continue Duke Qing's hard road to Shu. Even if we write something, it would only be like sticking a dog's tail on a mink's fur, adding a laughingstock for nothing. Duke Qing should just write the latter half himself, so we can clearly see the gap between us. Though Yu Shernan's words were blunt, they immediately gained the agreement of Li Tai and Hou Haitang. Master Qing, please just finish it yourself. Hou Haitang also joined in, smiling. This young woman wants to see how the second half of Hard Road to Shu will be. Li Tai agreed as well. Yes, I'm afraid only Master Qing can write a continuation that matches. Qingxiu smiled without speaking, looking toward the crowd, and they all echoed on the spot. Please, Duke Qing, finish the second half. From their eager expressions, it seemed they wouldn't eat or drink until Qingxiu had written the rest. Very well, just writing half leaves me uncomfortable too. Qingxiu took up the brush again. Hou Haitang quickly moved to grind the ink for him, but Cui Yuyan's hand was even faster. Only then did Hou Haitang suddenly realize that Qingxiu had come out today with his wife. Watching Cui Yuyan devotedly grind the ink for Qingxiu, Hou Haitang's heart was full of disappointment. But I've heard Duke Qing already has many wives and concubines. He could still marry again, couldn't he? Even she was startled by this sudden thought, but then, inexplicably, she began to feel a bit of longing. Even Hou Junji thought it strange. This Hou Haitang, who usually stood aloof and looked down on everyone. How was she suddenly so eager today? And usually she referred to herself as this young lady. Yet before Qingxiu she had changed to this humble woman? Qingxiu slowly closed his eyes, silently reciting Hard Road to Shu over and over in his heart. Finally, he lifted his brush and swiftly wrote out the rest of the entire poem. Though the Brocade City is said to be joyful, it is better to return home early. The difficulty of the road to Shu is greater than ascending to the blue heavens. Turning sideways to look west, I sigh long. When he set down the brush, Chen Fangqing hurried to take the paper. And under everyone's gaze, read out the rest. In that moment, all the previous sense of mismatch vanished into nothing. Once again, everyone was struck by Qingxiu's peerless literary talent. Especially Yu Shernan and the other two. After hearing it, they felt their earlier continuations were utterly shameful. They couldn't even bear to look at them now. Good, good. Li Tai, unable to restrain himself, praised aloud. Majestic and grand, astounding. Master Qing, I fear even 1,000 years from now, no one will surpass this hard road to Shu. He felt deeply fortunate to have witnessed such a grand work's birth in person. The others were so shocked they could not even speak. Only a few quick-minded ones began copying each line as it was read, afraid to miss even a single character. One could say the shock Duke Qing had brought them was something they had never experienced in their lives. With this one poem alone, Duke Qing was worthy of being remembered in history. Father, now I finally understand what it means by, there are always people better than oneself, and heavens beyond the heavens. Hou Haitang spoke with a dazed tone, her back toward Hou Junji. Don't be too discouraged. Seeing her like this, Hou Junji felt a pang of pity and was about to comfort her. But then he noticed the girl was looking at Qingxiu with a face full of excitement. As if she wanted to eat him alive. At that moment, Hou Junji suddenly recalled her requirements for a future husband. Along with her unusual behavior today. Could it be that this girl has also fallen for Duke Qing? A truly terrifying thought popped into Hou Junji's mind. And it happened to be correct. Honored by everyone's praise, I'll stop here for today. No need to steal everyone's limelight. Especially since this year's first talented scholar has yet to be decided. Ignoring their shock and amazement, Qingxiu slowly sat back down. Elder Yu, as a senior, you shouldn't compete with these younger folks. If you made a move, how could they compare? Yu Shernan was still savoring Hard Road to Shu in his mind. But upon hearing this, he immediately came back to himself. Good, good, I wasn't here for that today anyway. Yu Shernan gave Qingxiu a complicated look, ending only with a sigh buried deep in his heart. He was glad that if he had met this man in his youth, his own status in the poetry world would never have reached what it was now. Duke Qing, why not write a few more poems? It's such a rare gathering today. The more you write, the more we can spread your work far and wide. To have your grand masterpieces passed down for 1,000 years, wouldn't that be wonderful? Chen Fangqing still tried to persuade him. But Qingxiu only shook his head in refusal. With these two poems holding the event, they were already enough. Husband, I've never seen you show any interest in poetry before. I didn't expect you to be hiding it so deeply. Cui Yuyan's eyes now sparkled with little stars as she looked at Qingxiu. Her admiration for him had soared even higher. And she felt extremely lucky to be his wife. When we return home, will you compose a few poems for me? Seeing her expectant look, Qingxiu smiled. Of course, but it depends on your performance tonight. If you make me happy, perhaps I'll write something excellent. If you disappoint me, then don't blame me if it turns out less than ideal. Qingxiu leaned in slightly, and the soft curves before him trembled enticingly. Husband. Cui Yuyan's cheeks flushed red. But she clearly enjoyed it. Just as Qingxiu had said, he didn't interfere further in the gathering. He let the topics be given and the talents compete, rarely stepping in directly. Even though the poet's enthusiasm remained high, without Qingxiu's involvement, they all felt the contest had suddenly turned into a meaningless squabble among mediocrities. After this, no matter what poems or essays were presented, when compared to Qingxiu's works, they all lacked much of the charm. As dusk approached, this poetry gathering gradually drew to a close. Although the event would still continue for nearly 3 more days, after the contest for the first day's First Talented Scholar title ended, the enthusiasm of the following days could not compare to today. In the end, after the competition among the various talented scholars, the title of First Poet still fell to Ho Haitang. Although Li Tai was defeated, he was not convinced about Ho Haitang. He knew there was a gap between the two of them, but it was definitely not large. Master Qing, tomorrow I will definitely surpass Ho Haitang and take this title. Li Tai thought Qingxiu might be disappointed in him, so he quickly promised. But Qingxiu only responded with a faint smile. He didn't care about it. Not only him, others didn't care either, including Ho Haitang herself. With Qingxiu present, this title of First Talented Scholar falling on them seemed ironic no matter how they looked at it. Duke Qing, today's poetry gathering is ending, and the First Talented Scholar has been chosen. Since the meeting is about to disperse, could you compose a poem to close the event? Just for the sake of these gathered talented scholars, what do you say? Chen Fangqing was still unwilling to give up and wanted Qingxiu to compose another poem. Even Yu Shernan couldn't sit still, subtly encouraging from the side. Duke Qing, even I will shamelessly ask you, would that be possible? Please, Duke Qing, write a poem to end the event. Yes, even though we have no fate with the First Talented Scholar's title, being able to see more of Duke Qing's poems makes this trip worthwhile. Please write, afterwards we will all compete to spread your works far and wide. The crowd urged one after another, each more impatient than the last. Seeing that the atmosphere was already set, Qingxiu began to feel eager as well. With things built up to this point, it would truly be hard to end without writing something. Qingxiu again took up the brush, and in just a short moment, he had composed another poem. The speed amazed everyone. They knew that anything Qingxiu wrote would be a masterpiece, but to produce such high-quality poetry so quickly showed how astonishing his mind was. Once again, everyone bowed in full admiration. I know that today many talented scholars have gathered, and many believed they would surely win the title of First Poet, yet still met with a bleak ending. But failure is only temporary, regretting yesterday is not as good as looking to tomorrow. This poem is called Hard Journey. I dedicate it to all the disappointed scholars here. This time, Qingxiu did not hand it to Chen Fangqing, but recited it aloud himself. Wishing to cross the Yellow River, yet the ice blocks the stream. Wanting to climb Taihang, yet snow fills the mountain. At leisure, I fish by the green creek. Suddenly, I dream of riding a boat to the sun's edge. Hard is the road, hard is the road. So many crossroads, where to now? There will be a time to ride the wind and break the waves. I will hang my cloud-like sails straight and cross the vast sea. When the poem ended, the crowd fell silent. Many who had been full of disappointment felt suddenly awakened by this poem. They had never expected that the supremely gifted Qingxiu could also write something so profoundly moving. It directly caused everyone to burst into applause on the spot. Good poem. No wonder you are Duke Qing, under heaven, only you could write such stirring poetry. If I could have even half of Duke Qing's poetic achievement in the future, I would not have lived in vain. The applause thundered, and everyone marveled. Especially the last 2 lines. They were immediately taken as life mottos by every poet present. Yu Shernan, sitting to the side, clapped quietly. He did not cheer loudly like the others but instead discreetly wiped a tear from the corner of his eye with his sleeve. This poem truly brought back many memories for him. But fortunately all those things were in the past. Yet the more he had experienced, the more he felt this poem was tailor-made for him. Everyone left reluctantly. And before leaving, Chen Fangqing specially approached Qingxiu, earnestly asking to buy the original manuscripts of the 3 poems Qingxiu had just written. Name your price, no matter how much, I can accept it. Even if you don't want to sell all of them, just one is fine, any one of them. Chen Fangqing was almost kneeling in front of Qingxiu. He truly wanted those originals. Qingxiu thought for a moment and did not refuse, giving him the original manuscript of Hard Journey. This poem was originally written for the poetry gathering. There's nothing wrong with letting you keep it. But I am not giving this to you personally. It is a gift to the Hibiscus Garden Poetry Conference. Understand? 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 Chen Fangqing carefully received the manuscript as if it were a divine gift. Then, name your price. No need, I already said it's a gift. Qingxiu refused without a thought. If he wanted to set a price, Chen Fangqing's entire fortune and life wouldn't be enough to pay. If he was in the mood, giving it for free was no problem. Thank you, Duke Qing. Chen Fangqing took a deep breath, his eyes brimming with tears. From now on, the closing poem of the poetry conference will always be this one. And indeed, from that year on, at every Hibiscus Garden Poetry Conference, Hard Journey was the final poem. While Chen Fangqing was still moved to tears, Hou Haitang finally came forward to speak with Qingxiu alone. Master Qing, thank you for your guidance this time. Hou Haitang spoke a little nervously. It's nothing, haha. Also, this first poem I wrote, I'll give you the original manuscript. Next time I see you, I expect you to have improved. Qingxiu generously handed her the original manuscript of the first poem. Hou Haitang looked at him in surprise. She never expected him to be so generous. Thank you. The girl carefully took the manuscript. Her cheeks suddenly flushed red as blood, and she quickly turned and ran away. Is your daughter always like this? Qingxiu asked Hou Junji with some confusion. Yes, I guess. Hou Junji scratched his head. Today he almost thought his daughter had been possessed. I'm not deeply versed in poetry, but seeing everyone's reactions, I can tell Duke Qing's skill in poetry is not shallow. Duke of Lu, you overpraise me, it's just a minor skill. Everyone is giving me too much credit. Hou Junji suddenly leaned closer to Qingxiu. Earlier I spoke to you about something, has there been any progress? Qingxiu immediately knew what he meant. The court was preparing to attack Tuyuhan, and all the preparations were nearing completion. The next step was to choose the commanding general for the expedition. Months ago, Hou Junji had asked Qingxiu to speak to the emperor on his behalf, so that he could become the commander of this campaign. So Duke of Lu is still thinking about this matter. This is no small matter, of course I'm thinking about it. Hou Junji chuckled. This matter was extremely important to him. His title of Duke of Lu was still obtained during the Xuanwu Gate incident back then, but in the end, it could not be considered particularly solid. After all, that time he gained benefits by taking the right political side, whereas the Duke of Lingjing earned his title through the actual destruction of a country. If he failed to seize this opportunity and someone else in the court took it and thus claimed the great merit, his standing in the court would inevitably decline day by day. Especially since his sons were mediocre in ability, he had to strengthen his foundation in the court as much as possible while he was still in his prime. Qingxiu originally did not want to get involved in this matter, but suddenly thought of the case of Shui Rengui. He had planned to send Shui Rengui to the front lines for some real training, preferably in a large-scale war of national destruction. Now that Hou Junji was seeking his help, perhaps he could use this opportunity to negotiate terms with Hou Junji, having him take Shui Rengui along with many of his own household guards for proper training? Although if Lingjing chose another general, he could still send Shui Rengui for training. If he could set conditions, Shui Rengui would surely learn more from Lingjing and grow faster. Especially since this destruction of Tuyuhan was a cross-border expedition, its difficulty was many times greater than fighting in Lingnan. Duke of Lu, in this matter, I can think of a way to help you. But I have one condition that you must promise me first. Hearing this, Hou Junji was overjoyed. He had been waiting for so long and finally got a real promise from Qingxiu. Duke of Qing, just say it. If it's something I can do, I will absolutely not refuse. It's nothing troublesome. I have a few household guards, and also some military officers I noticed during the last Lingnan campaign. In the future, they should all grow into generals. Hou Junji was indeed an old fox. He understood at once. I don't know about the others, but one of them must be Shui Rengui, right? Back then, Hou Junji had also heard in court that Lingjing directly named Shui Rengui, and the two had even argued over how Shui Rengui should be rewarded, so he remembered it clearly. Indeed, he is worth training with all effort. Hou Junji did not waste more words. He immediately nodded and agreed. In that case, as Duke of Qing says, if I can go on this campaign, I will teach him everything I know in my life. With this promise from Hou Junji, Qingxiu said no more, only smiling meaningfully. It's a deal. It's a deal. Having obtained Qingxiu's promise, Hou Junji was in high spirits and immediately urged Qingxiu to visit his home as a guest. But Qingxiu had no such leisure, politely refused, and said he would definitely visit next time. All right. If Duke of Qing truly has no time, then this old man will wait to invite you next time. But recently, I bought a batch of ornamental trees from merchants of the great food country. They look very pleasing when planted at home. In a few days, I will have some sent to you. Duke of Lu is too kind. Qingxiu did not take it seriously, simply bidding farewell to Hou Junji. On the way back, as Qingxiu sat in the carriage with eyes closed, Cui Yuran suddenly said softly, "Husband, what do you think of Miss Hou Haitang from the other day? Her talent in poetry is quite good, her future achievements are limitless. Unfortunately, as a woman, she cannot hold office." I mean, how is that lady's figure? This made Qingxiu open his eyes at once. He then noticed Cui Yuran had a mischievous smile on her face. Indeed, given how clearly Ho Haitang behaved the other day, anyone but a fool could tell she liked Qingxiu. Of course. Such a peerless beauty throwing herself into his arms, if Qingxiu refused, would he still be a man? Cui said meaningfully, it seems it won't be long before I have another younger sister. Then aren't you afraid the nights you have to wait will increase by one? That's why, tonight, shouldn't you make up for everything I lacked before, and which I gave to my other sisters? Cui pressed herself tightly against Qingxiu, and the two immediately became distracted by desire. The next morning, all the fatigue from last night's fierce battle was gone. Not long after Qingxiu got up, he heard that Ho Junji had already sent the ornamental trees over. A few servants were planting them in the back garden. Qingxiu was not very interested, but since Ho Junji had taken the initiative to send them, he intended to take a look. Ornamental trees were nothing special, and if they were from the great food country, they would likely be date palms. However, such trees required a climate that the interior could not provide. Even if planted, they would probably wither within a month. Why does this tree keep oozing resin? It's so sticky. Yeah, I accidentally got it on my hand earlier, and it won't wash off. How am I supposed to work later? As soon as he entered the courtyard, Qingxiu heard the servants complaining. When they noticed him, they quickly stopped. Duke of Qing. This is what Duke of Lu sent. When Qingxiu saw the tree being planted, he froze for a moment. Then, shock filled his eyes. He grabbed a servant and asked, "This is what they sent?" "Yes, they just brought it not long ago. It's just that this tree has a lot of sticky sap, and we haven't cleaned it off yet." Before the servant could say more, Qingxiu stepped forward and examined the tree closely. Unlike the others, this tree's surface had many cracks, constantly secreting yellow resin, sticky and hard. He casually pinched some with his fingers. It was hard to clean off and had a pungent smell. Latex, and these leaves. The servants thought Qingxiu disliked the resin and hurried forward to clean it, but he directly ordered, "Don't throw away the resin you clean off, collect all of it, not a single bit missing. And this tree must be kept alive, absolutely cannot let it die." Hearing this, the servants responded immediately. Knowing Qingxiu liked this tree very much, they didn't hesitate and started working at once. While they were busy, Qingxiu kept observing the tree, comparing it with his memories. Absolutely right. Qingxiu was certain, this tree was an oak. Oak was not only an excellent building material, but the resin it produced could be made into rubber, which was an extremely important industrial product. Even in later modern times, natural rubber was a very important industrial material, useful in all fields. And at present, Qingxiu needed rubber very much. He had not forgotten his earlier plan to build a palace hot spring and supply running water to every household. To realize these plans, large amounts of rubber were the most important thing. He couldn't help feeling overjoyed. Wasn't this perfect timing? Just when he needed it, it was delivered to him. "Prepare the carriage and horses, I'll personally go to the Duke of Lu's residence. And make sure this tree does not die. Don't worry, Duke of Qing. Even if we have to sleep in the garden tonight, we will definitely make this tree thrive." Seeing how much Qingxiu valued it, they stopped talking and each picked up a shovel to get busy. Qingxiu walked out of the duke's residence, the summer wind blowing, and the blazing sun shining straight overhead. It was only early March of spring, yet it felt as hot and dry as midsummer. The morning sun beating down directly already made people feel irritated. This abnormal weather did not attract much attention from others, but it made Qingxiu more convinced that a locust plague would come soon. Why does it have to be at this time? Thinking of the oak tree he had just planted, Qingxiu felt a bit anxious. A locust plague often came together with drought and extremely changeable, extreme weather. If he wanted to plant oak trees on a large scale now, the difficulty would be great. The survival rate might not even reach half. It's really troublesome. Qingxiu personally went to the Duke of Lu's residence. Before he even entered, he saw a merchant in Arab clothing being escorted out by servants. "Please thank Lord Ho for me. If he still wants more, I will definitely find a way to get him more." "Hee, then I'll trouble you, Lang Shining. Also, my master still wants some other flavors of spices, preferably ones that have never been sold in the Tang before." "Yes, yes." The Arab merchant and the servant were chatting happily when the latter suddenly saw Qingxiu arriving in person. He quickly went forward to greet him. "Greetings, Duke of Qing. Is the Duke of Lu here?" Qingxiu didn't say much, asking directly. "No, my master just went out for something. I heard he went to inspect the Dingnan army, and probably won't return for a day or two." Hearing this, Qingxiu vaguely understood that Ho Junji was likely making preparations for the coming expedition. Going to the border army camp now was probably to select strong soldiers to fill his personal guard. Whenever a general went to war, he needed a force that was strong in combat and completely loyal to him. If the battle was at a stalemate, or if the army's morale was low, the personal guard would be the sharp blade used to break the deadlock. Any general good at fighting would certainly have such a strong force in his hands. The servant warmly said, "Why don't you come inside, Duke of Qing? The master instructed that you are our honored guest, and if you come, we must treat you well." "No need. When he returns, please let me know." Qingxiu was not in a hurry. Just as he was about to leave, the Arab merchant, who had been watching him for a while, suddenly called out, "Are you the Honorable Duke of Qing? May I introduce myself? I am a merchant from the great food country, named Lang Shining. A pleasure to meet you." This merchant from the great food country spoke Chinese fairly fluently, which made Qingxiu look at him again. "Your name doesn't sound like someone from the great food country." "He, Duke of Qing is truly learned, you saw through it at once." Lang Shining removed his turban. "My real name is too hard for Tang people to pronounce, so I took a Tang name to make it easier for people to remember me when doing business. Don't look down on me as just a wandering merchant. I sell many things, whatever official merchants can't get, I have it." Qingxiu wasn't interested at first, but suddenly remembered that yesterday Ho Junji told him he bought the oak tree from a merchant from the great food country. Qingxiu tested him by asking, "I'm quite fond of certain ornamental trees. Do you happen to sell them?" Yes. "A few days ago the Duke of Lu bought some Yila trees from me, those you can't get from official merchants." Qingxiu was immediately interested. The Yila he mentioned was the Arabic name for oak. It must be him. "How about we find another place to talk?" "All right," Qingxiu agreed at once. Lang Shining's face lit up with joy. If he could get a big customer like Duke of Qing, his fortune would be made. "I'll take you to Baiweiju. I hear it's the best restaurant in Chang'an." "You haven't heard that it's my business?" Lang Shining's face froze with embarrassment. "I also heard there's a hot spring estate outside the city. That's also mine." Lang Shining's eyes widened. Only now did he realize Duke of Qing was not just famous and respected. The businesses just mentioned were ones he had investigated himself, each was a gold mine making huge profits daily. And all of them were owned by Qingxiu. If he could hold on to such a powerful connection, he would no longer have to wander the land as a small trader. "Come with me." Qingxiu brought Lang Shining back to his own residence. When that man saw the luxurious Duke of Qing's mansion, far grander than other dukes' estates, he was utterly shocked. In the great food country, the only building comparable to this was the royal palace. Qingxiu wasted no words, directly stating that he liked oak trees very much and wanted to buy more. "Not just whatever you have now, if you can bring me more in the future, I'll buy them all. I want to plant an entire oak forest." Qingxiu's words were bold. Lang Shining's hands trembled with excitement, and he quickly hid them in his sleeves so Qingxiu wouldn't notice. He never thought that the oak trees other merchants dismissed could actually open up such an incredible market. "Of course. Right now I still have more than 30 oak trees, all reserved for you, Duke of Qing. I originally sold them to the Duke of Lu for 10 guan each. For you, 8 guan per tree, how about it?" The price sounded outrageous, but it wasn't necessarily too high. The oak trees had been transported over a long distance, and keeping them alive along the way was costly. Plus, since they were sold as ornamental items, some markup was normal. But Qingxiu was very dissatisfied with the price. He wasn't buying them for decoration, he wanted to plant them in bulk to produce rubber, so he could not accept this price. Qingxiu remained silent, which made Lang Shining feel increasingly uneasy. Even without words, he could clearly sense that Qingxiu was unhappy with the price. "If I were only buying 1 or 2 trees, I wouldn't think it too expensive. But I want to plant an entire oak forest. For such a huge order, do you think this price is reasonable?" Lang Shining gave an awkward laugh. "If you're not satisfied, how about 5 guan per tree? That's already the lowest price. Please understand a small merchant's 2 guan per tree. No second price." The bargaining was so sharp that Lang Shining couldn't help but draw in a breath of cold air. "Maybe you think it's too low, but if I want 1,000 trees, or even 10,000, and can take them all, do you still think this price is low?" Qingxiu asked with deep meaning. Lang Shining could hardly believe it. The words Qingxiu had just spoken to him echoed in his ears, and he even thought he was hearing things. "You mean, even if it's over 10,000, you can still take them all? Are you really certain about such a huge quantity?" If the person sitting before him wasn't Qingxiu, he would have thought this was a joke. 20,000 guan of money, just to plant an ornamental forest for enjoyment, such extravagance and waste was something even the Tang Emperor might not necessarily do. Of course, it was only because Ling Jing was frugal. If it were the previous Sui Emperor Yang, doing such a thing would be completely ordinary. "I'm not joking with you, as long as you can produce them." What Qingxiu cared most about was not the price, but where Lang Shining could possibly get so many saplings. After all, in the desert areas of Arabia, it was absolutely impossible to grow oak trees, so he greatly doubted whether this person had a stable supply source. Please rest assured. I can definitely get more than 10,000 saplings, but such a huge import and export volume will probably take quite some time. I understand. This is a long-term business. I don't mind if it takes longer, Qingxiu naturally said. He then instructed the servants, and before long, Guzi brought over a banknote and handed it to Qingxiu. This is the first payment, for buying the remaining 30 oak trees you have. Because the purchase quantity this time is small, I'll buy them at 5 guan per tree. After this, no matter how many you transport to Chang'an, I will take them all at 2 guan per tree. Looking at the banknote in his hands, Lang Shining was certain he had finally found a long-term golden rice bowl. When he had first transported the oak trees to Chang'an, it had been with a gambling mindset, just to try. Oak trees were not especially beautiful, had low ornamental value, and easily produced sticky resin that many people found extremely unpleasant. Even selling to Ho Junji this time was because the latter bought one just to try, for fun. Who would have thought that something the official merchants of the great food country didn't value would become his sales breakthrough? And at first, he really had only been trying it out. Please rest assured, Duke of Qing, next time I come, it will definitely be starting from 1,000 trees. Lang Shining was already thinking that for his next shipment, he wouldn't bother with anything else, just transporting oak would be enough. This would be more profitable than those so-called hot-selling goods. May I be so bold as to ask, where do you get so much oak from? Qingxiu noticed a trace of hesitation in Lang Shining's expression and added, I won't compete with you for this business. Long-distance trade is far less profitable than my own industries. I'm just curious. Lang Shining thought about it. Qingxiu was not someone who would take his business, so he spoke frankly. His trade route began from Arabia, first going to India to buy special spices, then following the trade routes to the Tang to sell. He had discovered the oak trees in India as a special product. At the time, he only thought they were curious and that perhaps someone might like them, so he bought a small number of saplings to try. He never expected that Qingxiu would open up a path to profit with them. Duke of Qing, are you interested in anything else? For example, spices, or rice from India? If not interested in these, next time I could also bring you some Kunlun slaves. Those slaves are strong and enduring, and can harvest cotton and hemp all day without tiring. Kunlun slaves? Qingxiu was quite familiar with this name. It should be one of the most popular products in maritime trade nearly 1,000 years later in Western Europe. Thinking about how at this time the Arab Empire spanned 3 continents, Europe, Asia, and Africa, and often went to Africa to fight and plunder, it was easy to understand how Lang Shining could get those pitch-black Kunlun slaves. No need. I'm not interested in them. Haha, from what I know, many nobles in Chang'an are willing to buy Kunlun slaves for farming, with excellent results. If you ever want them, just tell me, I can get as many as you want. Lang Shining left fully satisfied. Who wouldn't be happy to secure such a long-term meal ticket? But what he didn't know was that Qingxiu was even happier than him. After considerable effort from the servants, they finally planted the seemingly unimpressive, sticky oak tree. After 2 days of continuous observation, seeing that the oak was gradually sprouting new leaves, they were finally at ease. The oak tree had survived. Soon after came the 30 oak saplings sent by Lang Shining, which left Qingxiu momentarily unsure where to put them. Although the gardens of the Duke of Qing's mansion were not small, planting another 30 trees was not a problem. But if in the future he really planted tens of thousands of oak trees, the mansion certainly could not hold them. For this reason, Qingxiu looked around the area near Chang'an and directly chose Xiashang village as the best plantation site. After a recent bout of malaria, Xiashang village had lost more than half its population. Most of the young survivors had a strong aversion to the place and almost none dared to stay. After the malaria subsided, most of them moved elsewhere or went to Chang'an to make a living. Now, only some elderly people and children still remained in the village. If not for the fact that these people had no means to relocate, the village would already have been empty. Qingxiu's reason for choosing this place was simple: water access was extremely convenient. When he personally inspected the village, he saw several streams flowing through it. If it were not downstream, it would truly be prime farmland. This may be the best place within the region to grow oak trees. Naturally, Qingxiu did not delay. That night, he informed all the villagers that he was buying the land. And he offered to purchase their land and houses at twice the market price, which made all the villagers praise the Duke of Qing for his generosity. They had already been thinking about how to leave this cursed place. Qingxiu was doing them a great favor. With such a sum, they could buy land and houses elsewhere without trouble. After acquiring the land, Qingxiu wasted no time, spending heavily to hire all nearby villagers. In 7 days, level all the crops and houses in Xiashang village, lay fine soil, and plant oak trees. This move shocked many surrounding villagers. Such good farmland, directly cleared to plant trees. In their eyes, this was nonsense. They couldn't even understand the concept of returning farmland to forest. They simply thought planting trees was a waste of land, and if possible, they would rather cut down all forests to grow crops. Even if they didn't understand, under this call, a large number of villagers still came. There was no helping it, Qingxiu was paying too much, and even providing food and lodging. With over 1,000 villagers working at the same time, their efficiency was much faster than Qingxiu had expected. Forget 7 days, it only took 4 days to flatten the entire Xiashang village. When it came to the key step of planting oak trees, Qingxiu decided, out of caution, to personally try planting them. When the 30 oak saplings were delivered to Xiashang village, everyone was surprised to see Qingxiu personally digging the soil, inspecting it, and testing the water temperature. Duke of Qing, didn't we manage to plant them successfully before? Just leave it to us, why trouble yourself? The household servants rolled up their sleeves, eager to try, but Qingxiu refused. Last time you succeeded in planting them, it was only because of luck. If we plant on a large scale without the right techniques, the survival rate might not even reach 30%. Oak trees liked a humid, warm environment, and had very high requirements for water and sunlight. At the same time, the soil had to be slightly clay. The kind of farmland used for crops was not suitable for oaks to grow. Qingxiu first planted them in soil he had specially prepared, and also diverted water channels to surround the oaks, keeping them as moist as possible. Still feeling it wasn't enough, he ordered his subordinates to fertilize and water the oaks. For 3 days straight, Qingxiu stayed in Xiashang village without leaving, watching the oaks' growth. But during this time, there were no signs of survival. Qingxiu listed all his observations and planting methods over the past few days, feeling it was becoming more and more troublesome. Even the household guards and servants found it strange. It was rare for Qingxiu to care so much about something, especially trees that didn't seem to have much ornamental value. Could these trees grow gold or something? Qingxiu had of course heard his subordinates talking behind his back, but he neither confirmed nor denied it. They wouldn't grow gold, but what they produced was worth far more. Could it be that my planting method still has flaws? Or is the climate here unsuitable for oak growth? Qingxiu went through his notes one by one, already losing much hope for their survival. Looks like I'll have to wait for the next batch of oaks and think of another way. If it doesn't work, I'll send them to Jiangnan to plant. Just as he was thinking this, there was a sudden, urgent knock on his door. Duke of Qing. Those trees have turned a bit strange. What is it? Qingxiu closed his notebook, thinking the trees had indeed died. But he wasn't very disappointed, he had expected this. You'd better come see for yourself, I can't explain it. Following the servant to the plantation, it was midday, and the blazing sunlight was almost blinding. Since this morning, whenever the sun shines on these oaks, they start producing resin. Do you think they're being sun-scorched to death? Qingxiu went forward to look. The surface of every oak tree was overflowing with pale golden, transparent liquid, shining brightly under the sunlight. Of course not. A smile appeared on Qingxiu's face, he knew he had succeeded. Upon inspection, 17 of the 30 oaks had survived, proving his method was absolutely correct. Call everyone over and collect all the resin, don't waste a single drop. Watching everyone busily harvesting the rubber, Qingxiu knew that the most troublesome step had already been passed. Especially thinking of all the uses for rubber, Qingxiu's anticipation grew even stronger. In recent days, Li Er had noticed that Qingxiu had not been to court, only sending a leave request each day, saying he had important matters and could not attend, but that His Majesty would understand in the future. What is that fellow locking himself away to study this time? Li Er knew that every time Qingxiu shut himself away, after some time he would come out with something that shocked everyone. After the morning court session, Li Er had planned to personally visit the Duke of Qing's residence to discuss matters. But on second thought, given Qingxiu's current state, he would probably just be turned away without seeing him. Tell Prime Minister Xiao to, never mind, forget it. Li Er was about to give orders to the eunuch, but changed his mind. This matter was still safest to discuss with Qingxiu. But just after leaving the Taiji Hall, a eunuch brought him a letter. Duke of Qing ordered us to deliver this directly to His Majesty, please read it. Li Er raised his brows. How did that fellow know I wanted to see him? If you really wanted to be thoughtful, you'd come to the palace yourself and discuss things with me. Opening the letter, Li Er was immediately shocked. Today, he had been thinking that preparations for attacking Tuyuhun were almost complete, but he had not yet decided on the commander-in-chief. The letter from Qingxiu was precisely about this. In it, Qingxiu suggested that Hou Junji lead the expedition against Tuyuhun, expressing great trust in his ability to take on this important responsibility. If your majesty has other better candidates, I am not opposed, but I ask that your majesty carefully consider the positions of all the generals in both the army and the court. This sentence was the core of the letter, and it touched directly on Li Er's imperial strategy. He knew that his second choice was to have Li Jing lead another campaign. After all, for a war to destroy a nation, sending the most capable commander was the most reliable choice. Moreover, Li Jing had already proven his ability in the previous war. He could certainly destroy Tuyuhun as quickly as possible. But that was exactly the point Qingxiu had just raised. If Li Jing earned another great merit in a war of annihilation, how would he be rewarded? Would his position in court and the army become even more unshakable? Would he, in the future, become proud of his achievements, making it hard for Li Er to tolerate him, just as with Yuqi Jingda? Even from an omniscient perspective, Li Jing was a completely loyal minister, but in reality, Li Er's doubts about him only disappeared on the day Li Jing died. Even when Li Jing was gravely ill in bed and unable to take on military appointments, Li Er could not resist using the example of Huoguang to warn him. This showed that his trust in Li Jing was far less than his words suggested. And Qingxiu's words struck right at the point. If Li Er had a choice, he would definitely not have Li Jing lead the attack on Tuyuhun. Hou Junji. Li Er thought of that minister who had unhesitatingly chosen his side during the Xuanwu Gate incident. He knew this man had the ability to lead troops, but had rarely participated in large-scale battles. Not to mention serving directly as the commander-in-chief of tens of thousands of troops. In that regard, his experience was zero. Without Qingxiu's suggestion, even if Li Er considered 10 candidates, Hou Junji would not have been among them. What does Duke of Qing see in him to be so certain? Li Er did not necessarily trust Hou Junji's ability, but he had never doubted Qingxiu's judgment. For various reasons, he was now beginning to lean toward Qingxiu's suggestion. In a while, I should still speak with the Duke of Qing in person. A few days later, Qingxiu patiently waited outside the blast furnace for the rubber refining to be completed. After many attempts and improvements to the furnace, Qingxiu had already vaguely figured out the critical point for refining rubber. It was fortunate that he had the raw material of natural rubber. If it were synthetic rubber, with current conditions he truly could not have made it. While waiting for news, he was also sketching and writing in his notebook. Husband, what is this? I don't think I've ever seen it before. Chang Sun Pingting came closer to look, only to see that Qingxiu's sketches were all sorts of strange things. Some looked like shoes, some had the peculiar shape of a large circle with a small circle inside. These were all items Qingxiu had drawn that could be made from rubber, based on the productive capacity and limitations of this era. After all, with such an ahead-of-its-time material in hand, Qingxiu naturally wanted to put it to all possible uses. You'll find out then, Qingxiu said with a slight smile. Open the furnace. A shout suddenly came from inside the blast furnace, followed by a burst of busy activity, and a handcart was slowly pushed out, piled high with many black rubber products. These were all cast from molds Qingxiu had ordered to be made in advance, though most people could not recognize them. Is this a wheel? It's so soft, how could it possibly be used? I think this looks like a glove. Yes, it really is a glove. They stared at a large tire for a long time, puzzled. In their minds, wheels should be solid wood to be sturdy, something this soft would probably flatten immediately under the weight of a carriage. Bring my carriage here. Qingxiu gave no explanation, directly handing the craftsman the diagram for installing the tires, ordering them to follow it exactly. Duke of Qing, it's not that I refuse, but look, if this tire is installed directly onto the wheel, the extra weight will make the carriage harder to pull. The craftsman still found it hard to believe, but Qingxiu simply waved his hand. Just do as I say. Other problems are not for you to worry about. The craftsman said no more, and began fitting each tire. Although the first installation took considerable effort, even damaging one tire, it was eventually completed. While they were still thinking about how many horses it would take to pull such a load, Qingxiu took some needed rubber fittings from the products and quickly assembled an air pump. With rubber, it's so convenient, the sealing problem I've struggled with for so long is now completely solved. Qingxiu's brows relaxed. He then taught the craftsmen how to use the pump, telling them to fill each tire with air. This was completely beyond their understanding. They had never seen gas stored and used in this way. Once the tires were filled, Qingxiu had the craftsmen pull the carriage themselves, so they could feel for themselves the advantage of rubber tires over wooden ones. He even claimed that compared to wooden wheels, these could save at least half the horsepower. At first the craftsmen were skeptical, but when they actually pulled the carriage, they found it really was about half as heavy as before. And on uneven roads, the bumpiness was greatly reduced. Just as Qingxiu had said, compared to the old wooden wheels, these rubber tires truly made the carriage feel much lighter. These tires are amazing. Rubber really is better than wood. How did you think of this? Could you sell us some rubber? We'd like to change the wheels at home too. The craftsmen were full of admiration for Qingxiu, crowding forward to ask questions. It was clear they loved the tires. And this was only their use on carriages. If used for transport, efficiency in all areas would multiply. Wooden wheels not only had the problem of being heavy, they were also troublesome in durability. For large-scale transport, a carriage often had to reserve space for several spare wheels, to be replaced during rest stops. And once a wooden wheel was damaged, it was almost impossible to repair, it had to be discarded entirely. With a tire, it was completely different. If damaged, it could simply be replaced, and in any case its durability was several times that of wood. Even Changsun Pingting, curious, tried to push the carriage. A carriage she could never move before, with the new tires, could now be moved by her alone. It's really amazing, husband, you truly see further than anyone. Only now did Changsun Pingting understand why Qingxiu wanted to plant oaks on such a large scale. If rubber could be continuously produced to make wheels like these, the entire Tang's transport capacity would rise by a whole level. It seems the rubber refined this way really is usable. Qingxiu was already envisioning all kinds of practical rubber goods, feeling eager. Everyone, for now, keep the matter of these tires secret. Once I improve them, they'll be put on the market at a more affordable price. And more importantly, you must never reveal the source of the rubber, especially not to foreign merchants. With Qingxiu's repeated warnings, none of the craftsmen dared to disobey, and each remembered it firmly. Whatever Qingxiu said now, they took as absolute law. 2 days later, a carriage drove slowly from outside the city into Chang'an, but this seemingly ordinary carriage drew the attention of many townsfolk along the way. A carriage itself was nothing special, but the horses pulling it were so scrawny and old-looking that one could tell at a glance they were aged nags. Horses like these could barely pull a small cart, yet here they were pulling a rather luxurious large carriage with ease. Even on bumpy roads, it made no difference, the carriage remained steady. This scene attracted quite a crowd. They wondered what kind of breed could be so strong despite being so aged. Isn't that the Duke of Qing's carriage? Look, it even has his crest on it. It is indeed. This must be a fine breed. Could it be Fergana horses from the west? But it doesn't look like it. That wheel, why is it black? Is it wrapped in silk? All along the way, the constant chatter made Qingxiu, inside the carriage, feel very pleased. The more amazed these people were, the more the news about his tires would spread, and by then it would be easy to promote them on the market. Duke of Qing, are we going directly to the Forbidden City? No need. I've finally been able to take a few days off from court, and I've barely rested before you want me to go to the palace. I understand. Erguzi chuckled, then turned the carriage around and headed straight back to the Duke of Qing's residence. Qingxiu wanted to avoid Ling Er, but he didn't know that after finishing his own matters that day, Ling Er had already changed into casual clothes and, accompanied by guards, had come to wait for him at the Duke of Qing's residence. Just as Ling Er was about to doze off from waiting, he finally saw the Duke of Qing step down from the carriage and enter the residence. Hee, I've been waiting for you for so long, why did you only just come back? These past few days, I don't know what you've been busy with outside the city. Why haven't you come home? The moment Ling Er saw Qingxiu, his spirits lifted, and he started firing off questions one after another. Looking at Ling Er's lively enthusiasm, Qingxiu couldn't help scratching his head. Looks like I came back at the wrong time. No, you came back at exactly the right time. Ling Er was just about to get to business when he suddenly noticed that Qingxiu's carriage was being pulled by an old, thin horse. You, the Duke of Qing, can't even bring out a good horse? Why don't I send you a few fine ones? This has nothing to do with the horse. Doesn't your majesty wonder why I'm using an old horse to pull the carriage? Qingxiu patted the wheezing old horse meaningfully. Ling Er heard the hidden meaning in his words and temporarily forgot the important matter, stepping forward to examine the carriage closely. With one look, he immediately noticed that the carriage's wheels were different. Even pressing on the wheel revealed a certain elasticity. Ling Er was astonished, he had never seen such strange wheels. After fiddling with it for a bit, Ling Er realized that all the carriage's secret lay in the tires, no wonder even such an old, thin horse could pull it. Duke of Qing, what are these wheels made of, to increase the carriage's pulling power so much? First he was surprised, then Ling Er couldn't help imagining further. If such tires could be installed on carts for transporting supplies in wartime, efficiency would certainly be greatly improved. Not only would the speed increase, but the number of conscripted workers could be reduced, and the consumption along the way would be much lower. If it originally took 30,000 conscripts to fight a war, perhaps it could be done with only 20,000, even 10,000. The thought excited Ling Er so much that he could no longer suppress it. He looked at Qingxiu, only to find that the latter's expression was also meaningful. So Qingxiu had deliberately let him discover the tires. What does your majesty think of this item? If we use these tires on supply wagons for the Tuyuhan campaign, the time needed for victory could be cut by at least half. Ling Er didn't hold back his praise at all. Duke of Qing, can you make more of these tires before the war begins? Of course, as long as your majesty. Money is no problem. Just name your price, I can even pay in full in advance. If you need manpower, just say the word. Hearing this, Qingxiu's brows relaxed completely. Indeed, this was the easiest way to move Ling Er. The price can be discussed later, what matters most is your majesty's sincerity. Ling Er thought to himself, sincerity? Money is worth more than 1,000 words. The more he learned about the tires, the more he liked them. He couldn't help but marvel at how the Duke of Qing came up with inventions that could skyrocket the Tang's productivity. He even bought the carriage from Qingxiu on the spot for 500 guan, planning to take it back to study the tires himself. Qingxiu didn't mind, after all, the material was rubber. Even if Ling Er studied it endlessly, he could never make it out of thin air. As for synthetic rubber, for the Tang at present, it was nothing more than an unattainable dream. Seeing that Ling Er had finally calmed down from his initial excitement, Qingxiu got straight to the point. Your Majesty, what brings you here this time? Reminded by Qingxiu, Ling Er remembered he had almost forgotten the main matter. Of course, it's actually quite important. Ling Er glanced around, and Qingxiu understood, immediately ordering the servants nearby to leave. Duke of Qing, are you sure Hou Junji is the best choice for commander? Seeing Ling Er's uncertain look, Qingxiu said firmly, from every perspective, he is the most suitable choice. Although he has no experience with large-scale troop battles and hasn't achieved the great merits of destroying a nation like Ling Jing, I have discussed military strategy with him in depth, and I know he has unquestionable talent as a commander. The latter part was, of course, made up. He had spoken fewer than 10 sentences with Hou Junji. Still, from an omniscient point of view, Hou Junji did indeed fit the evaluation he gave. Ling Er was shocked. If such praise came from Qingxiu, then Hou Junji was definitely worth trusting. Good, good. For the Tuyuhan campaign, the position of commander must go to him. Ling Er wholeheartedly believed Qingxiu's judgment, though this was even more about his own considerations for balancing the court. Will the Duke of Qing accompany the army this time? Ling Er asked with some expectation, but Qingxiu only shook his head slightly. It's just the destruction of Tuyuhan, why should I go along? His tone was so light, as if destroying Tuyuhan were a foregone conclusion. To Ling Er, this only made him even more confident in Hou Junji. If Qingxiu said this, it meant Hou Junji had the ability to settle Tuyuhan. Though Tuyuhan's strength could not match the Turks, it had always been a strong enemy that the Tang approached with caution since its founding. Ling Er immediately decided, once spring plowing was over, he would send troops to conquer Tuyuhan. After Ling Er left, a servant who had been waiting nearby hurried forward and presented a document. I know you're busy today, but when this document was delivered, they said it was extremely urgent and had to be opened by you personally, so I didn't dare delay. I understand. Hearing that it was a letter from Lingnan, Qingxiu's expression grew slightly more serious. For nearly a month, the news from Lingnan had all been good reports. Now, suddenly, an urgent letter had arrived. This must mean that something had happened there that Chendayan and the others could not handle. Indeed, it was just as he expected. In the letter, Chendayan mentioned that the commoners who had migrated from the Tang to Lingnan had gotten into serious conflicts with the locals. Whether in daily living habits or in matters such as land cultivation and harvest division, the locals and the newcomers had large differences over almost everything, and even several armed clashes had broken out. If it weren't for the timely control of the Tang troops stationed there, these conflicts would likely have escalated into riots, which would have been impossible to contain once they started. In just a few lines, the seriousness of the situation was already self-evident. Although Qingxiu had previously expected that the locals might have conflicts with the Tang immigrants, the fact that it had escalated into armed clashes was indeed somewhat beyond his expectations. However, this was also the most important problem in integrating Lingnan into the Central Plains. Whether this problem could be properly resolved could even directly affect Lingnan's allegiance to the Tang dynasty in the coming decades. Qingxiu thought for a moment, then personally wrote a reply to Chendayan. His solution was simple and direct: give every Tang citizen who had migrated to Lingnan a large sum of money, so they could use it to buy the local Lingnan people's houses and farmland. At the same time, for Lingnan people willing to migrate to the Tang heartland, also give them a relocation allowance and strongly encourage them to leave Lingnan. If they were unwilling to leave, then encourage them as much as possible to marry Tang citizens and subtly change their perception of being Lingnan people. Make them recognize themselves as now citizens of the Tang, completely turning the idea of Lingnan from that of an independent kingdom into merely a geographical concept. At the same time, Lingnan people could only be relocated to Shu and the Two Rivers region. They were not allowed to settle in the Liangguang area. This was to avoid the risk that if Lingnan was poorly governed in the future and rebelled again, the Liangguang region would not respond in unison. This tactic of mixing sand and divide and rule was precisely the best method for governing newly annexed territories. In fact, there was an even more efficient and quicker method: to deal with the Lingnan people in a completely inhumane way. Of course, if the Tang dynasty had all under heaven submitting and no border troubles, such a method would be most appropriate. But now, with only a few thousand Tang troops in Lingnan, and with all logistics dependent on local supply, it was simply impossible to deal with tens of thousands of people using just a few thousand soldiers. Not to mention that sending more troops into Lingnan would only turn it into a bottomless pit that continuously drained the Tang's national strength. This would go against the original intent of conquering Lingnan. Send this to Lingnan by fast horse, make it as quick as possible. Tell Chendayan that all grain, silver, and valuables in Hongha City, as long as they are my portion of the tax revenue, he may use them freely. There's no need to save costs in this regard. Qingxiu worried that Chendayan might hesitate to spend and cut back on supplies, so he added this special instruction. Understood. The servant took the letter and immediately arranged for a fast horse to deliver it to Lingnan. Qingxiu could already imagine Chendayan in Lingnan as if sitting on pins and needles. As a junior officer, to have such a heavy responsibility on his shoulders was indeed difficult for him. For a full 2 months without trouble, this Chendayan is quite a talent. Qingxiu had originally planned to recall Chendayan once the officials took office, but now it seemed he was well suited to be his agent for remotely controlling Lingnan. The document Qingxiu sent to Lingnan truly saved Chendayan from disaster. The day before the letter arrived, he had already prepared for the worst, gathering all his troops, ready to suppress a riot at any moment. With Qingxiu's approval, the first thing Chendayan did was order his subordinates to quickly take out large amounts of silver and grain from the warehouse to put out the fire. Indeed, all the disputes stemmed from economic issues. Once money and grain were provided, both sides immediately brightened up and lost all desire for rebellion. At the same time, as the relocation order spread, the Lingnan people who yearned for the fertile lands of the Central Plains responded one after another, taking the money and grain to prepare for migration. They had suffered under Feng Eng's oppression in Lingnan for too long, and their fear of this land had long outweighed everything else. Even though they knew that there were no longer such vampires ruling them here, they still wanted to escape if they could. Especially the young and strong men and women, they were even more willing to leave Lingnan and try their luck in the Tang. When they learned that the Tang recruited soldiers regardless of origin or ethnicity, and that even northern Hu tribes could enlist and rise in rank, they became even more eager to venture out. Likewise, many landless farmers from Liangguang and long unpromoted soldiers learned that by going to Lingnan to open farmland, they could get a large subsidy, along with cattle, horses, and tools. They were even more willing to actively go to Lingnan to settle and cultivate the land. As a result, within just a few days of the relocation order being issued, an extremely strange scene appeared at the Tang-Lingnan border. Lingnan people bringing their families to settle in the Tang, while some of the Tang's own down-on-their-luck people cheerfully brought subsidies, cattle, horses, and tools to Lingnan to put down roots. Some even voluntarily chopped down trees along the Miasma-ridden mountains to make migration easier. This in turn led to another pleasantly surprising result. Lingnan's miasma decreased day by day, making travel, farming, and daily life much more convenient on both sides of the border. In just a few days, this great migration had already quickly shown the effect Qingxiu wanted to achieve. Nearly half of Lingnan's young and strong population were preparing to leave, replaced by a rapid influx of Tang people taking over the space they vacated. And those Lingnan people who stayed were mostly the elderly, women, and children. Compared to the vigorous, young, and strong Tang settlers, they posed no threat at all. At first, Chendayan and the others thought this plan was a waste of money. But when they compared the migration rosters of Liangguang and Lingnan, they suddenly realized that Qingxiu's arrangement was truly a stroke of genius. In less than 3 years, at least 2/3 of Lingnan's land will be occupied by Tang citizens. At that time, why worry about Lingnan ever rebelling again? Chendayan and the others looked at each other, then all burst out laughing. Once the situation was stabilized again, Chen disbanded the soldiers he had gathered, sending them back across the land to maintain order. At the same time, he received Qingxiu's order to send back to Chang'an all the officers he had previously taken note of. Among them was Wang Jui, who had fought desperately to earn Qingxiu's recognition. Only then did Chen realize something was off. Qingxiu was calling back so many people, yet not him? Could it be that the Duke of Qing wants me to stay in Lingnan to maintain order here for him? Thinking of this, Chen immediately became excited. To rise through the ranks as a civil official was certainly easier than killing on the battlefield. If he did well, he might one day become the governor of a region, bringing glory to his ancestors. Following the Duke of Qing was indeed the right choice. Father, mother, your son finally has a chance to make something of himself. When I become governor one day and bring honor to the family, I will surely return home in glory and bless the whole village. Chen nearly burst into tears. At this moment, he was truly grateful both to Qingxiu and to his ancestors for being buried in the right place. Li Er closed the memorial from Lingnan, and at this moment all the ministers in court saw the smile on his face. Without a doubt, Li Er's reaction to the news from Lingnan could be described as pleasantly surprised. He had originally thought that even if Lingnan were taken, Qingxiu would need at least 3 years, even 5, to digest that region and bring it completely under control. He even thought that after Qingxiu left office, if later officials were incompetent, there was an 8 or 9 out of 10 chance that Lingnan would once again stir up trouble. But in less than 2 months, the population structure of Lingnan had changed drastically. More than half were now Tang citizens. This meant that in no more than 30 years, over 80% of Lingnan's population would be Tang people. In addition, the miasma in Lingnan had been conveniently cleared away, so that the court would no longer face any natural barrier in attacking Lingnan. Such an achievement was unimaginable before the expedition to Lingnan. Now I understand why you wanted to take all of Lingnan's tax revenue for yourself. This must have cost quite a lot of silver to handle properly, yes? Li Er's gaze toward Qingxiu had changed, even showing a trace of admiration. To plan and recover a distant territory far from the core area in such a short time, Qingxiu's merit was enough to be remembered in history. That's true. But if your majesty could reimburse the costs of relocating the population, I would be even more grateful to you. Ahem. The work you've done in Lingnan is excellent. I will send you an additional 3,000 elite soldiers to garrison Lingnan, under your command. When it came to money, Li Er immediately changed the subject. Clearly, he was already well practiced in this. Then Li Er looked toward the assembled ministers and said with a loud laugh, "You, my beloved officials, often compare me to the sage kings Yao and Shun. I do not know whether I can live up to such a comparison. But Duke Qing is definitely comparable to ministers like Guanzhong or Yue. To receive such praise publicly from Li Er was beyond measure in value. Your Majesty is wise." Ministers like Changsun Wuji, who already leaned toward Qingxiu, immediately praised him aloud. As for the likes of Gao Shilian, although they were extremely displeased in their hearts, they had no choice but to follow along out of formality. "Minister Wei, you've never gotten along with Duke Qing, why are you looking so excited?" Gao Shilian noticed Wei Zheng's face full of joy and couldn't help asking in a low voice. "Of course I'm happy. The Tang has fully recovered Lingnan and subdued tens of thousands of local people. This is a blessing for our state. Why wouldn't I be happy?" Gao Shilian's face darkened. "I'm talking about Duke Qing. I don't care who has earned the merit. If it benefits the Tang state, I will naturally praise it without reservation." At that, Gao Shilian completely closed his mouth. Wei Zheng truly was a stubborn old man. This fellow really did focus only on the matter, not the person. The court originally thought today's morning audience was over and were preparing to leave. But unexpectedly, Li Er spoke again. "Hold on before leaving. I still have an important matter to announce." At these words, the smile on Li Er's face disappeared. It was replaced by a look of sinister sternness and killing intent. At that moment, everyone felt the pressure from Li Er's expression. They suddenly realized someone was about to be unlucky. Bring in the envoys from the Caliphate, the envoys from Lufan, the envoys from Shache, and the war criminals from Tuyuhun. When these names were announced, everyone immediately became alert. Even Qingxiu, who had been mentally wandering, briefly focused his attention. Through the court's constant mobilization in recent times, this announcement's meaning was self-evident. First, the envoys from several countries were brought in. Most of them were covered in injuries, wrapped in many bandages. Then, several dozen Tuyuhun war criminals were escorted in. Most were dirty and disheveled, wearing tattered armor and hanging their heads dispiritedly. Li Er stared sternly at the envoys and the war criminals before him. The countries of the western regions have always had good relations with the Tang. Putting aside trade exchanges, their annual tributes have always been given with great sincerity. But you Tuyuhun, barbarians who fear strength but not virtue, have not only refused to submit to our Tang, but have repeatedly harassed and killed the envoys and caravans of various countries, disrupting the Tang's trade order. Your crimes are monstrous. I have always had a benevolent heart, unwilling to kill, and have many times sent envoys to persuade the Tuyuhun rebel leaders, yet you never reform. No matter how much I lecture, it is useless, and you even dare to attack our Tang border troops. At these words, the Imperial Guard stepped forward with weapons, pressing down the Tuyuhun captives. The prisoners were so terrified their faces turned ashen. One after another they fell to the ground, kowtowing repeatedly and babbling in barbarian tongue to beg for mercy. Of course, Li Er's words contained some exaggeration. These Tuyuhun captives had not actually taken the initiative to attack Tang border troops. Rather, they were captured in a pre-planned Tang military raid. But this did not change the nature of the statement. Although Li Er was using this as a pretext to justify the war, if Tuyuhun were allowed to develop unchecked, sooner or later they would indeed take the initiative to attack Tang troops, and even go so far as to cut off the Heshi corridor or seize control of western trade routes. As Li Er's voice grew harsher in his denunciations, the foreign envoys and merchants present began to weep, cursing constantly. They thought of the fear and oppression they had suffered along the way at the hands of Tuyuhun, and felt nothing but grievance. We beg your majesty to do us justice and teach these barbarian beasts a lesson. These beasts not only robbed our money, they even tried to take us back as slaves. If I hadn't run fast, I too would have been captured. Please, your majesty, do us justice. We have brought letters from our kings, asking your majesty to punish Tuyuhun and uphold justice for us. At the same time, the ministers cooperated with Li Er, shouting curses. Your majesty is wise, it is right to campaign against Tuyuhun. We will fully support your majesty. If Tuyuhun is not destroyed, the northwest of the Tang will never know peace. Qingxiu yawned, hoping this play would end soon. I have decided to campaign against Tuyuhun, rescue the envoys and merchants of all nations, return their property, and make Tuyuhun repay its crimes many times over in the Heshi corridor. Li Er looked coldly at the already terrified Tuyuhun captives. Behead them all, leave not one alive. The imperial guards immediately pushed and shoved the soldiers out of the palace. Before long, their cries were abruptly cut off. As silence returned to the palace, everyone knew the next step was to announce the commanding general. Before Li Er spoke, everyone had already assumed that the commander for this expedition would definitely be Li Jing. Apart from him, the Tang could not choose another capable of leading tens of thousands of troops deep into the desert for a long-distance strike. Even Li Jing himself believed that this command was certain to be his. For this campaign against Tuyuhun, I appoint 30,000 troops. The commanding general is. At these words, everyone's eyes naturally turned to Li Jing. He was already preparing the acceptance speech in his mind. He did not think there was a second candidate. At that moment, Li Er was still somewhat hesitant. This was 30,000 elite troops, mountains of grain and equipment, and all the various troubles the Tang would face if this war were lost. If the choice of commander was wrong at this moment, the consequences would be unimaginable. Enough. When Duke Qing took Lingnan back then, I thought he was boasting wildly, yet in the end, didn't he complete the task beyond expectations? Li Er no longer hesitated and immediately announced, I appoint Duke Liu, Ho Junji, as the commanding general. As soon as these words came out, the hall fell silent. Li Jing's smile froze on his face. He had not yet recovered from his earlier confidence and certainty. Everyone looked at Ho Junji in disbelief. They could hardly imagine that a man whose rise came through political alignment would actually be entrusted with such an important task. Although this man could be considered a general capable of winning battles, in a war of annihilation of this scale, shouldn't the most reliable commander be chosen? Ho Junji could not hide the joy on his face and immediately stepped forward to accept the order, as you command. I will not fail this trust and will annihilate Tuyuhun in one battle. Your Majesty, wise. The ministers all responded together. No matter what they thought, the choice had been made, and it was not proper to object. Moreover, Li Er had not held a formal meeting to ask for their recommendations beforehand, showing clearly that his mind was already made up. Li Jing quickly changed to a look of admiration, cupped his hands, and echoed, Your Majesty is wise. Although he bore great merit, his temperament was cautious, and he never grew arrogant from his achievements. He vaguely sensed that Li Er was deliberately balancing the merits of his courtiers. Clearly, Li Er did not want him to become another Huoguang, and of course, he dared not think that way himself. Duke Liu, I know that although you never show off, you often study military strategy and are well versed in it. This war is not necessarily about destroying Tuyuhun entirely. As long as you drive them out of the Heshi corridor area, you will have completed your mission. Every step beyond that is an extra merit. Li Er looked at Ho Junji, whose joy was written all over his face from excitement, and could not help reminding him, fearing that too much pressure would lead him to rush recklessly. Your Majesty, I am willing to make a military oath here and now. If I do not destroy Tuyuhan in this war, I am willing to accept any punishment from your Majesty, and I will never again serve in any military position in the court. This shocked the entire court once again. They had not expected this man to be so ruthless toward himself, yet they did not know whether his strength and confidence matched his words. Could it be that Duke Lu is jealous of Duke Wei's merits, and so, by making such a military oath, he is taking a great risk? Let's hope he truly has the ability. The ministers whispered among themselves, but most did not have much confidence in Ho Junji. Very well, as you say. At this point, Li Er could not easily give Ho Junji a way out, even if he wanted to. It was just as well, he wanted to take this chance to see where Ho Junji's confidence came from. Then Li Er granted Ho Junji the imperial edict and the command seal in open court, declaring that this decision would not be changed, and only then were the ministers allowed to leave. But after leaving the court, the ministers had little hope for the matter. Taking the initiative to put himself on the fire to roast, this did not seem at all like Duke Lu's usual cautious style. As soon as Qingxiu left the Forbidden City, Ho Junji, who had been waiting for a long time, came up immediately. Duke Qing, I must thank you for speaking for me before His Majesty. If there is ever anything I can do for you, just say the word. Ho Junji's face was full of joy, as if he had already returned victorious from the expedition. Save your thanks. What I hope more than anything is that you can return victorious. After all, I gave my word to His Majesty on your behalf. In that case, I am even more grateful to Duke Qing. When I return victorious, I will repay you many times over. His confidence was so great that even Qingxiu found it strange. He himself had the advantage of knowing from an omniscient perspective that Ho Junji had the ability to lead troops. But Ho Junji clearly had not spent much time in actual military campaigns, yet seemed to have been born knowing his mission and ability. Seeing Qingxiu's surprise and doubt, Ho Junji leaned in and said quietly, "Does Duke Qing still remember that I went to the Dingnan army some days ago?" The Dingnan army was located in the northwest, an area originally occupied by the Turks. Later, after being defeated by Li Jing, those Turks unwilling to submit had fled north or west. Only some who declared loyalty to the Tang remained. Most of these people lived precariously by herding livestock along the frontier and paid tribute regularly. The task of the Dingnan army was to keep watch over them. You obtained intelligence from the Dingnan army? Qingxiu raised his brows slightly. Exactly. Those Turks living on the border live extremely harsh lives. They want a chance to earn merit for the court in exchange for being allowed to live in the Central Plains. If they can be used well, the war with Tuyuhan will not be much trouble. Ho Junji stopped revealing more at that point, but from his expression it was clear that he was already confident of success. Very well, I won't ask further. As long as you can accomplish the matter and not let down my guarantee to His Majesty. Qingxiu gave another instruction, and Shui Rengue, who had been waiting by the carriage, stepped forward immediately. This is Shui Rengue. From now on, Duke Lu, he will be under your command. After speaking, Qingxiu patted Shui Rengue on the shoulder. When you go to war, hold back your arrogance. Whatever Duke Lu teaches you, you must remember. Understood. Shui Rengue answered at once and cupped his hands toward Ho Junji. I will be in your care, Duke Lu. You are Shui Rengue? A true hero in youth. At only 18 years old you dared to face 70,000 with just 2,000 men. It seems your achievements are no less than any in the court. Ho Junji's eyes lit up when he saw him, and he looked him up and down, full of praise. If he had not already known that Shui Rengue was Duke Qing's personal retainer, he would have wanted to take him into his own service. On the way back, Shui Rengue remained silent, frowning, as if thinking about something. Qingxiu could vaguely guess the young man's thoughts. You think Ho Junji can't be trusted? Please don't blame me for speaking plainly, he really doesn't look like a commander good at war. Shui Rengue spoke his mind directly. You used your standing with His Majesty just to protect him? It's not to protect him, it's an investment. You will understand later. I only want you to remember one thing, obey Ho Junji in all matters. Learn everything he reveals, understand? At these words, Shui Rengue said no more and simply replied steadily, Don't worry, boss. That night, Shui Rengue could not sleep for a long time. In the middle of the night, he even took out his lance and practiced vigorously in the drill yard all night long. In the past, when following Qingxiu on campaigns, he never had to think about anything, he only needed to be like a sharp sword, locking onto the target and charging into the enemy ranks. But now, having to rely entirely on himself, this was the first time he had experienced such a thing. I absolutely can't embarrass the boss. Before the troops move, the provisions must be sent first. Just as the main general was decided, the court also, at the fastest speed, began transporting military grain from Jiangnan via canal, sending it along the Grand Canal to the area around Chang'an as military rations. But when it came time to conscript laborers, the logistics officials unexpectedly found that the number of people assigned by the court was only half of the original planned figure. At first they thought it must be an error in the court documents, but no matter how they inquired, the court's reply was always the same: just carry out the orders. This immediately made what everyone had thought was a sure-win war suddenly seem uncertain and hard to feel confident about. No one had expected that Li Er would be so stingy in the matter of logistics, especially when the frontline commander had never before led such a distant expedition. No one knew how this battle would end, but the logistics officials were already privately pessimistic. When the laborers were finally assembled, Fang Xianling personally went to the military storehouses to check the supplies. Even he was shocked by the small number of laborers. Who handled this matter? With so few laborers, there's no way to transport the grain. Even the prepared margin for losses is far too little. How is this battle to be fought? Bring me the logistics officer in charge of this. Fang Xianling was furious. He was even prepared to have the officer seized on the spot and executed. But before long, he saw one of his subordinates return, and behind him came Qingxiu. That subordinate was already dripping with sweat. This, Duke Qing, he is. What is it? I'm not the logistics officer, but I was involved in this matter. The number of padded winter coats, and the margin for grain loss along the way, were decided by me together with His Majesty. Qingxiu could not be bothered to wait for the stammering official to finish his sentence. Fang Xianling was even more puzzled. Qingxiu had fought in hard battles. His understanding of military supplies should be no less than that of the emperor or Li Jing. How could he make such a low-level mistake? Lord Fang, you don't need to worry about this matter. His Majesty and I have it in mind. Fang Xianling protested. Duke Qing, you speak easily, but this concerns the outcome of an entire campaign. How can I not worry? Qingxiu didn't waste more words. He waved his hand directly. Move the grain. If there's a problem, I'll take full responsibility. It has nothing to do with anyone else. The laborers, who had been waiting for a long time, each took up their pushcarts, coming forward one by one to receive the grain. Fang Xianling couldn't rest easy and quickly looked toward the guards at the storehouse, hoping they would block the move. But those men, upon seeing Qingxiu, immediately stepped aside. Who would dare stop him? Duke Qing has the emperor's orders. How could we stop him, my lord? Their eyes shifted uneasily. Though they didn't say it outright, their meaning was clear. You want us to block Duke Qing when he has the emperor's command? Why don't you do it? Lord Fang, I know you're dutiful, and even though this matter has little to do with you, you've still put in a lot of thought. But after serving in the same court with me for so long, you still don't know me? Qingxiu looked at the slightly dejected Fang Xianling and shrugged. From a duty standpoint, I shouldn't interfere, but this concerns. Fang Xianling suddenly noticed that the loads on the laborers' pushcarts were far heavier than before, at least nearly half again as much, and yet they did not seem to be struggling. On the contrary, they pushed along chatting and laughing. This was far beyond his expectations. Normally, the pushcarts were loaded to just about the limit the laborers could barely manage. Though this greatly increased the transport volume, it also meant the laborers tired quickly and needed frequent rests. But now, it seemed they could push for more than 10 li without getting tired. How are these laborers so strong? Fang Xianling was baffled. He tried pushing a fully loaded cart himself. He had expected it to be very heavy, but instead it moved so lightly that he nearly stumbled when he overexerted. I remember now. His Majesty mentioned some time ago that you, Duke Qing, had developed a very strange wheel that greatly increases transport capacity. Fang Xianling suddenly understood. He had known about it, but hadn't thought much, figuring it could only increase capacity by 10 or 20%. He had never imagined it could have the laborer's burden and reduce the number needed by half. You truly are a remarkable man, Duke Qing. Fang Xianling was full of admiration. The manpower and material saved this way amounted to a huge sum. Moreover, it greatly reduced the number of laborers pulled from the fields, letting them continue farming, far better than having them pointlessly add numbers at the front. This is nothing yet. To Qingxiu, who had seen the transport capacity of the modern world, even this efficiency was still very low. With that, Fang Xianling set aside his worries completely and left the matter to Qingxiu. If he knew that even Hou Junji's appointment to command the campaign had been Qingxiu's doing, who knows what he would think. After this incident, news of how effective the rubber wheels were spread quickly through Chang'an. Along the route, people were eager to see the incredible carrying capacity of these rubber wheels. It nearly became a scenic sight of Chang'an. If we had these wheels for moving goods every day, how many fewer trips would we have to make? I agree, Duke Qing really is a genius. I just don't know if they're for sale. I bet they'd be expensive. If they come from Duke Qing, they might not be expensive at all. He probably wants even common folk like us to afford them. The most impressed were not only ordinary citizens. All the major merchant guilds, whether Tang merchants or traders from foreign lands, immediately saw the potential. If they could use such wheels in their caravans, they could carry nearly half again as much cargo. That meant over half again as much profit. Merchants from all over decided on the spot that they had to get these rubber wheels, and sent people to contact Duke Qing's residence. Among them, of course, was Lang Shining, who had sold rubber trees to Qingxiu. As he waited eagerly outside Duke Qing's mansion, he could never have imagined that these wheels were made from the rubber of the very trees he had sold.
Did you enjoy the story, guys? I hope you did. Support this video with a like and a comment. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks for watching and see you next time.